Hey, YouTube, what's happening? It is Metal Madness 66. Jeff here, alongside my partner in crime today, Mr. Jimmy from Future Ruins. And yeah, we're here for Gas Masks and Hand Grenades, special edition of Gas Masks and Hand Grenades, because today we have lead guitarist, composer, uh, college professor, Don Anderson from Agalloch and Sculptured with us here, and he's going to join us right now. Hey, Don, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you for having me. I appreciate
Cool,
it.
man. Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and we're really appreciative that you joined us. Um, we're going to roll into this thing hard and heavy here at this point. So, again, Don and I started communicating. Essentially, how this came down was that Jimmy and I, and Logan and Ryan, did a deep dive on Agalloch, about 4 weeks ago, maybe 5 weeks ago, somewhere in that range. And I ended up on a whim just seeing Don, seeing the Sculptured page, and I sent him a link to it. And ironically, he'd already actually. How'd that work out, Don? It came up in your feed, or?
No, it's much more embarrassing. I do find myself every now and then, Googling or YouTubing Agalloch, because I like to see.
Sure.
A lot of people do covers. I've seen a lot of bands put up covers of Falling Snow, and it's always fun to see. And also, I like to look for if old live shows have made their way to YouTube. So every now and then, I'll type in Agalloch and see what's recently been posted, and this came up, and I think I thought it was 4 hours.
You're like,
so I looked at it, like, how could they spend 4 hours talking about it?
I was just going to say, you're probably like, holy shit, these guys are like mega nerds.
Yeah, I mean, so I cruised through it, and I take it as a huge compliment that people would spend really any time. I mean, I really appreciate that. Even so many years after the breakup and things, that people still care enough that it takes up a great deal of their, time and thought and hopefully listening pleasure. So no, it was a humbling. It's nice. I still really appreciate that.
Awesome, man. That's so cool. Well, look, Agalloch was an important band to a lot of people. I mean, there's no getting around that. Jimmy and I met through YouTube, and I'm considerably older than both you guys. I'm pushing 57. So, yeah, I know I probably should have cut my hair and grown up a long time ago, but whatever. But, for me, it's a passion to talk about the bands that I really love. And this is a band that Agalloch is an important band for me that I got into with the Mantle. It's funny. I keep trying to remember exactly how I came into it. I think it was because I used to buy a lot of stuff from the End. And I think I just saw the cover and I did a review. I read some reviews. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna give this a shot. And it was very early in my days of getting into death metal, black metal, extreme metal. I was kind of a late comer because I was a little bit older than, say Jimmy, you're 44, right, dude?
Just about.
So, you're in that, you guys were teenagers when death metal and black metal was coming out. I was already pretty close to starting a family. I was probably close to like 28, 29. And, it was just one of those things where as soon as I put that album on, I was just transfixed and mesmerized because of all the different genres I was hearing, but yet it was your own sound. And so that's how this came about. I sent you the link. You were like, oh, I already checked it out. And then I'm like, dude, let's do an interview. And you were probably like, uh-oh, this guy. But, I really appreciate you doing it. So I am going to cheat a little bit, Don, because I am old. And I wrote a lot of these questions late last night because I had to start over. But let's start with, are you originally from Oregon, the Portland area, or were you born elsewhere? Or?
Yeah, I mean, technically I'm from Washington, but it was Southwest Washington. So Portland was my city growing up. That was where you went to see shows or go record stores or bookstores. So Portland has always been the cultural center of my world growing up, even though I was right across the river in Washington.
Okay. So let me pull up my note here real quick so I'm on the right page. So this is a question I tend to always ask, and it's a rote question, but I think it's an important question. What are your first and earliest memories of music, and how music affected you physically and emotionally? What are your first memories?
Probably a really early memory is my sister, probably as a young teenager, was taking piano lessons, learning how to play the piano, and we had a real piano in her bedroom, and so she'd be practicing playing songs like common sort of early piano repertoire stuff. And I would just go into a room, the lights would be off, maybe like a couple little dim lights. I remember just lying on the floor, listening to just the resonance of a real piano, just hearing notes decay and harmonize, and just kind of feeling enveloped by the sound. And that was probably the first emotional experience I had. And the second would definitely be, like a lot of kids, I was waiting to train sets. And my parents were into kind of old classic country music.
Okay.
And for them, Johnny Cash was a huge presence in the house. And my first concert was actually Johnny Cash.
I was going to ask that question, so we already kicked that one out. Although I need to know about your first metal concert.
Yeah, but Johnny Cash was the first one, and it was because he sung about trains. And my parents were like, "Oh, if you like trains, here, listen to this song." And I remember having headphones on, and I think Orange Blossom Special.
Orange Blossom Special, yeah, man.
And I remember listening to that on repeat because it had it was about trains.
It's got that gallop. It's got that gallop.
And so that got me into that. So those are my earliest memories of music.
Okay. You may have answered it, although you didn't. But what was your first instrument? Was guitar first, or was the piano first? Because there's a piano there, I'm assuming, or was it something else?
No, but I mean, I remember the popular song at that time was Survivor's "Eye of the Tiger." And my sister would play she would have me play the rhythm.
Okay.
And I would,
right.
And then she would do the dun 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 dun. I would go dun, 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 like that.
Nice.
But no, it was the guitar right off the bat, and it was because it was because we had a number of foreign exchange students from Japan who would come and live with us for a while, and that's how I heard a lot of heavy metal. Loudness, obviously, but also Yngwie Malmsteen, and it was Yngwie Malmsteen's Trilogy record that a guy had. And I heard that, and I said, I want to do that. And that's why the guitar became.
Now, how old are you at this point?
Probably 6.
Really?
6 or 7. Yeah.
That young?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. I mean, we had MTV. MTV was still playing music, and I think the first heavy metal song I ever heard was "We're Not Going to Take It" by Twisted Sister.
Oh my goodness!
And seeing that video was also like, it was classic.
Larger than life.
Rebelling against your parents and all this. I mean, it was super cool to a kid. And so I remember I used to take cassette tapes to show and tell in 3rd grade. I remember I was take AC/DC tapes and go through all the songs, talk about lyrics and things like this. So I got into metal very, very young.
How did
influences? How
did Big Balls go over with the teachers?
Well, it was Flick of the Switch, which is one of the weaker AC/DC records. But I remember there's a song in there called Bedlam in Belgium. I remember reading that song title off and asking the teacher, what does bedlam mean?
Oh.
And he was like, it means to go crazy. So,
nice.
That's the stuff. It was hard rock, at the time.
Okay, so you started actually playing the guitar at 6, or was that when you...
No, that's when I became really I wanted to eventually...
Infatuated with it.
And I would have cutout guitars out of cardboard and stuff.
Oh, nice.
And then eventually another foreign exchange student happened to bring his guitar and left it with me.
Okay, I was going to ask about this story because I read this. Go ahead.
And finally, I got to have a real guitar. Now it would have been cool, but it was like a Les Paul copy, the guitar knockoff.
Yeah.
So to me, it didn't look like a cool guitar at the time because now I play Les Paul, but then
right,
it was still, I got a probably really junky amp, and I would just bang on it. And then he went back to Japan and never was able to come back. So I inadvertently was gifted this guitar, and my parents were like, well, if you just got a free guitar, you got to learn how to play it.
Wow.
And so my parents were very supportive, and they put me in the guitar lessons right away. And so I was more than happy to do it because I wanted to be Yngwie really, really bad.
So Yngwie was like a real...
Huge.
Absolutely. No pun intended here, but Yngwie was a driving force for you then, is that...
Absolutely, yeah. I would when he wrote, I would read interviews with him, and he always said that he would practice 8 hours a day. And I would try to do the same. I tried to do everything he did. I mean, you can practice for 8 hours a day when you're in like grade school, you have more time. And I would make myself practice 3 hours a day at a timer and everything. And
wow,
if I didn't do it, he was like a kind of Santa Claus figure to me. Like I was afraid he was watching over me.
Well, he might have been. Who knows?
Like a weird kind of chaperone. You're not practicing enough. I was, if I listened to music that wasn't technical or virtuosic, I was afraid that it would be doing Yngwie. It was really like a godlike complex. It probably wasn't healthy. And it wasn't until I got into the Ramones that I was like, okay, enough of this.
Yeah, right.
And, but yeah, Yngwie was a huge, I tried to learn all the licks, and, I don't go much beyond those first 3 records anymore.
Odyssey's good though, man. Odyssey with Joe Lynn Turner. I like that album because it's very melodic. It's very song oriented. Eclipse isn't bad either, but I got to be honest with you, dude. I've not listened to Yngwie in so long now. It's masturbatory listening to him anymore. And I love Shredders.
Same stuff over and over again.
He does the same licks.
Does one thing exceptionally well.
He does. Yeah, he does.
And I think he's a very soulful player. I mean, I think he gets hate because if you listen to like Icarus's Dream Suite.
Oh yeah.
I mean, his vibrato is beautiful. He's very expressive. So I really actually find him a very, very expressive player. He can't play the blues. I don't want to hear him play the blues. That blues record he put out is dreadful. But
that album Odyssey is very melodic, and he's quite restrained on that album compared to a lot of the other stuff. So that's why that's probably my favorite. Although I love Trilogy and Marching Out, Rising Force, killer albums. But I probably shouldn't tell you my Yngwie story then. So many, but I'm going to. Many years ago, probably close to 20 now, I saw Lynch Mob open for Yngwie in a pretty small club. And Yngwie was just, I don't think I'm ever going to get to interview Yngwie, so I'm just going to say he was just being a dick. I heard him yelling at people behind the stage and yelling at roadies and everything. After the show, George came out during Yngwie's set. I just walked up to him. I started talking to him. And George is pretty fucking cool. He's a pretty cool cat. And we just sat there making fun of Yngwie the whole show. And this is when Yngwie was large.
Yeah. Well, what year was that?
He's not now anymore, but he was not healthy at that point. I think he was drinking probably a lot. So.
What tour was that?
I'm trying to remember. I want to say he had Doogie White singing for him. Does that sound?
I wonder if we saw the same tour. I mean, it wasn't with the Lynch Mob, but I saw him in '92. It's Fire and Ice tour. He played with Slick Toxic.
Oh God!
Remember that band?
Yes, I do remember that.
They had a great logo, that band, Slick Toxic.
Yeah, they were opening, but I got thrown out of that concert. My
Yngwie story. Really?
Yes, my Yngwie story is this. First, I was wearing a Jimi Hendrix T-shirt that said Hendrix on the back, really bright. And my mom took me to this show because we were too young to drive. So my mom took me and my friend, and I was just getting into concerts, and I wanted so badly to mosh and crowd surf. I didn't know that this wasn't something you do at a Malmsteen concert.
Yeah, right.
But it was festival seating. It was just people in a small club, and I was so ecstatic to do it. And I got someone to help me get up. And so I started to crowd surf, and I flopped down on the stage right next to Yngwie.
Oh, not good.
He was literally standing over me. I looked up, and there he is. And this is like my hero.
And you're how old?
I was maybe
15, 16. Oh, 13. Okay, you're a kid. Yeah.
I'm just a kid.
Yeah.
It happened real quick, but as soon as I got back in the crowd, I got bear hugged by security and dragged out so quickly.
You're shitting.
My mom was like, I just saw this Hendrix logo go flying out of the door.
and then realized it was her son.
Yeah, she was shocked that it was me. And I said, I got pushed up on stage. But no, I deliberately tried to crowd surf, and that wasn't kosher with Yngwie. So I got thrown out.
Geez.
I'd seen enough of the concert, so it was fine. But that was during his probably cocaine and booze.
I've seen him 3 times. I saw him actually open for Dio on the Lock Up the Wolves tour. Remember, I'm an old cat, so That was Eclipse, whatever year that would have been, when
Yeah.
he had Goran Edmond singing for him, I think was the singer on that
Mhm.
tune. And another good album. Eclipse was a good album too. But all right, so we'll move on from that. But those are great stories, man. Those are awesome to hear. Getting back to the musical instrument thing, so guitar was it. You started to play it like legit after you got this guitar that was left to you. And ironically, one of the questions I have was, you mentioned in an interview that I thought you said it was your sister's boyfriend, but maybe I misinterpreted what I read there. But were you ever able to reach out to that guy and talk to him ever again? And after he left the guitar?
No.
So what would you say to him? If you could talk to him right now, face to face, what would you say to him?
Well, I mean, I would just say like,
thanks, dude.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, I sold the guitar for a better guitar later.
I did.
Yeah, of course
I did. But
I would have done the same thing.
But it was, I mean, it was what I needed. I mean, it's because I didn't want to play acoustic. I wanted to play electric guitar.
Oh, it was an acoustic guitar.
No, it was electric. But I'm just saying,
okay.
Like, some parents are like, "Oh, you got to start on."
Yeah.
Something, and I was like, "No, I'm glad that my first guitar was electric because that's what I wanted."
Okay, gotcha.
And when I was teaching guitar, I was always saying electrics are easy to start on because of the action.
Oh,
not
for sure.
Tension on the strings and things. So no, I would absolutely say like, this was really the catalyst that got me to where I needed to go.
Super cool. To go back to music real quick, and then we're going to transition pretty quick. And you said your first concert was Johnny Cash. What was your first metal concert? And add to that, when did metal start to become a really prominent force in your life? I think you kind of answered that, but can you pinpoint it to a specific? And you said, what was the first song you heard on MTV? I mean, was that the moment, or was it
that
just
was a moment? Yeah,
okay.
That was a moment. I mean, it's not the most heavy metal song, but in 1985, 86, or whenever it was that the video came out, I mean, that's all I had. There was no internet, there was nothing. I was living in a small town called Camas.
Right.
And so all I had was MTV. And so I ran to the nearest place I could get, and I bought the Twisted Sister record. And I bought Cinderella, Queensryche, it was all kind of hair metal stuff, hard rock stuff. Ozzy and Dio, of course. But it's what I had. And so no, right off the bat, I would say by third grade, I was heavily into heavy metal.
Nice. That's killer, man. What was your first metal concert then?
That was Metallica, Black Album.
Okay. Black
What
Album.
tour was that? Was that the one with Guns N' Roses, or was that?
No, they didn't have an opening act on that tour. They had a video kind of thing, like an overview of their career, and so there was no opening act, which was cool because it's a long concert. And I know that seems like a late concert considering I got into metal, but remember I couldn't drive. I didn't have, I remember the Campaign for Musical Destruction tour with Napalm, Carcass, Brutal Truth, Cathedral came through, and I was like, oh, I really want to go see that.
Oh yeah.
But I was like 12. And I couldn't drive. My parents are going to take me to a Napalm Death concert.
Hey, Mom, can I eat Carcass?
But my friend's mom took me as a friend to Metallica, and then later that week we saw Malmsteen. So the moms switched. So my mom did Malmsteen, his mom did Metallica. They seem like safe concerts. So
yeah, I mean, my first show was Dynasty Kiss, 1979.
Oh wow!
And I was 13 almost. Well, no, I was 14. Second show was Rush, Permanent Wave.
Oh wow.
Amazing.
That man. Yeah.
Amazing show.
I think I'm your age, Don. So my first concert was Metallica as well. And my mother took me to it. And it was Metallica, Guns N' Roses, and Faith No More.
Okay, I do remember that tour coming through. I didn't go to that tour, but yeah, I remember that tour.
Yeah, I mean, Metallica, it was kind of like your Kiss for guys your age because, when I knew about Jethro Tull, Aqualung, I knew about Close to the Edge, Queen, probably 1 and 2 in the 70s, but those bands weren't on my radar like Kiss suddenly became in early 76 when I got Kiss Alive. Everything else didn't matter. That was the band. And only for a few years, though. By the time the solo albums and Dynasty came out, I was kind of already, I was already into Rush and Triumph and, by my estimation, much better bands. But that doesn't minimize the importance of seeing Kiss back in the heyday, man. I mean, it was a hell of a show to start with. So
yeah, I mean, and Metallica was the band that got me into metal, capital M.
okay.
And there was a period where I was into the hard rock, sort of hair metal stuff. And then I got into Guitar Heroes and I've just listened to only Guitar Hero stuff on Shrapnel Records.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Marty Friedman, Cacophony, even like Richie Kotzen's first few records, Vinnie Moore.
Tony
Passion Warfare blew my mind. It's
which one?
Steve Vai's Passion Warfare.
Oh, fuck. What an incredible album.
Phenomenal. And then I went over to a friend's house and my friend had an older brother. It's always the older brother.
Oh, yeah.
And he played me Eye of the Beholder because the Black Album wasn't out for a while still.
Right.
And so I got into him with Injustice for All. And it was Eye of the Beholder. It was the riff that opens that song. And I just was like, that is so cool. I just thought it was so cool. And yeah, I borrowed the tape and I listened to it and I was like, man, there's harmonies, there's melodies, the guitar player is really good, but just the riffs, I was like, that's what I like. So from there, Metallica opened the doors to, of course, Megadeth, Slayer, Testament, and then eventually to death metal,
right,
metal, and so on.
Gateway drug.
It was the gateway, yeah.
Yeah. To go tie back in real quick to music, I reading some of the prior interviews and things. You read music clearly, right? Or do you sight read, or do you write? Like, I mean, because it seems like you know all the theory stuff that, like, I'm a guitarist. You can see my '99 Ovation Balladeer thin body cutaway back there. That's the only one I have here, but I can't read music. I've tried and tried and tried. It's like trying to learn Japanese or another language because it's a language. Right. And I just can't get it. But I mean, do you read and sight read or how's that?
Yeah, I can read music. I can't sight read in the sense that if you put a sheet of music in front of me, I can just play it like that.
Okay.
I would have to practice and stuff.
Right.
But yeah, because I took music in college.
That's what I was wondering.
I had to learn how to read. But even when I started guitar lessons, I said I want to learn theory and learn how to read music, and that was a big thing even from the very beginning.
How important do you feel that is, as far as, you know, you hear a lot of, especially for metal and for certain types of music, if you're a jazz guitarist, it's pretty implicit that you should know theory and modes and, you know, and scales and all that stuff. But in metal, how's it helped you, or can you speak to that a little bit, like what your belief system on that is?
Sure. Yeah, because it's definitely changed and matured and grown over time. You know, because Agalloch, you know, me and John were very, very different guitarists. John also doesn't read music and is not a theory guy at all. And so we were very different how we approached things. And I came out of a very academic scene with music. But now I don't think it matters at all. I think what matters is always determined by the objectives you have set for yourself. And if those objectives do not require music theory or reading, and perhaps you're blessed with a really great ear, then it doesn't matter. I think the only thing that matters is that you say something that is yours only. You know what I'm saying? You know, right. Like if you take a band like the Ramones, one of my favorite bands of all time, no one else sounds like the Ramones.
Exactly.
And those guys, you know, we're not virtuosos. Can't
just bar chords the whole way. Man.
They did. I mean, it's phenomenal. And it's, you know, it's hugely influential. Yep. And so I don't think it's a prerequisite for success or anything, because you just have to look at yourself and say, am I happy with what I'm able to do with the tools that I have? And if you're not, then okay, you learn scales or modes or whatever. But like John's clearly done a lot of great work, both at Agalloch and his solo stuff. And he, you know, if I tell him, hey, can you play me a G chord? You know, he doesn't know where that is. He might by now. I don't know. But
I was going to say, I don't read and I'm not a theory guy, but I know where my chords are at for the most part.
I mean, he just, you know, but he has it here. He has a.
So he just does it all by ear. Yeah.
You know, and he doesn't. I don't think he would feel like he's stunted by it. I think he would feel he's happy with the work he's done and is doing. For me, with Sculptured, I was like, I wanted to apply this stuff because I wanted to break out of the patterns that were common to me.
Right.
And so music theory helped me break out of those patterns, and so I could see what they were and I could analyze them, and then I think of ways to break out of it. So like with the record I did, Embodiment, the third record is
can definitely hear it. You can definitely hear
because
it.
I was like, I mean, everything's a prison. You know, if you choose to write a song in C major, you've already determined a whole lot of things. You've determined your closely related keys, your parallel minor key, your 4-chord, your 5-chord. You've already determined so much of what you can do with that scale. It's a prison.
So it limits you.
It limits you in the same way. It gives you a place to work within. And I'm not so naive to think that if I do something that's atonal or serial, like with using matrices or shapes or other kinds of approaches, it's another prison. But it's a prison different than the other prison.
Right.
And so the only freedom you have is to move from prisons to prisons to prisons, because any sort of program you lay out to organize sound is going to have by default its barriers and its boundaries.
Right.
Well, it's a matter of working within that and exhausting it, and then you can move on from it and try something else.
Yeah, it's a set of parameters. So
and that's all like theory is, and it's also completely, it's Western. You know, if you go Eastern scales, Eastern music, Japanese folk music, it's
very different,
completely different. So it's also completely relative as well.
Yeah.
So if you can't read music and you're happy with what you're able to produce, then there's no reason to.
Absolutely. Jimmy, do you have anything you want to add at this point? We're going to jump into probably the sculptured section here, I believe.
Yeah, sure. I was just going to tell you, Don, man, it's good to see you again, because I left Facebook about 5 years ago, I think it was. But back when I was on Facebook, I kind of had a lifeline on you. And, I found you to be pretty transparent, and you posted often. So I got to see kind of what you were up to. And so like ever since, I kind of lost touch with you in a sense. And, I know you've got your sculptured page on Instagram. But I haven't actually been on there since then. I was just curious, are you still, have you still found a healthy relationship with social media? Do you still use it in your everyday life, or is that something that you've kind of, because I haven't been on Facebook, I haven't really seen what you're up to these days.
Yeah, I don't find it to be good for mental health. I mean, myself, I do feel it. I can feel the addiction. I can feel getting caught in the scroll.
Yep.
And, but I also have the influence of having a very public, horrible breakup happen on social media, and, the fallout from that. And that was just hard to hear all the commentary and noise and just be constantly inundated with it. And it became too easy, and it felt like information overload. So I chose to leave, particularly not too long after that, because there was nothing productive about it. Yeah. And sculpture was kind of dormant at that time anyways. And I just want to get back to a non-electronic, non-social media world. And so I quit Facebook personally.
Oh, you did?
I kept the sculptured page, which kind of just retired a little bit. And then when sculpture started kicking up again, in BMG, the record label at the time, they were like, well, you got to have a YouTube page. You got to have an Instagram page.
I have a social media presence.
And like, I'm nobody. I mean, this is BMG, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, okay. And I hated having to do it. And so I did it. But even now, I can see myself on Instagram more than I'd like to be. And I thought about deleting that. It's a real catch-22, because so much of how we promote music nowadays is through social media.
It is.
I do ultimately feel social media is toxic and an incredible danger to critical thinking and democracy and information. So I have a very love-hate relationship with it. No, not even a love. I don't love it. I just do it because like you have to some degree to promote your music.
Well, if you can find some sort of like happy medium, I mean, like I left Facebook for the same reason. I felt like, there was a lot of personal things that happened, but my account kept getting hacked, and it was a very kind of intrusive place, and, eventually toxic place to be. So I just decided I can't, do this anymore. Instagram kind of became more of a, like, it was kind of more of a, like a, I guess maybe if you want to call it like a voyeuristic kind of thing. Like, personally, I do like wilderness photography and shit like that. So it kind of was a good medium for me in trying to find like a, some sort of, healthy arena there. And then ultimately it's been where people like me and Jeff network and things like that. But I was just interested to learn that, because I remember back in the day, I kind of got a lot out of, following you, because, you would post often on, not just, things you were up to. And, Yeah, it's just interesting kind of where we've come so far because there's so much information. I don't know if you've seen the social what was it called, the social dilemma, where it really like broke down like all
the documentary.
Yeah, where they got into like how they really designed it to work, and it's pretty eye-opening stuff.
Yeah, no, I definitely left because of mental health. I could just feel it creeping in my head. I just wanted to turn that noise off.
Yeah.
And I wanted to read books more and watch movies more and just kind of be present more.
Yeah, I don't know about you guys, but I don't do any social media, so.
Well, good for you. My wife doesn't either.
That's why I have a YouTube channel. Duh.
Yeah.
So, but Don, I'm glad you didn't shut it off before we got a chance to talk to you. So, I had one last question that fell into that first category, and it was, we kind of talked about what made you decide to pursue a music career, but more importantly, what made you decide to go to school, to get a professional degree, to get a professional job, to become a teacher? What the duality of that decision there, that dichotomy? You were a rock star. You are a rock star. You're not Paul Stanley rock star, but I don't know. Would you really want that? I don't know. Money wouldn't be bad, but all the other bullshit that goes along with that, I'm not sure it'd be worth it. But what led you down that path and to where you're at now?
I mean, there's a lot of crossovers between performing music and teaching. I mean, the first thing is when Agalloch started, when Sculpture started, I was like, I'm never going to be famous with this music. There was no, I mean, this was late 90s. Like, we didn't think Agalloch, we never would have thought Agalloch would have ever been where it got. We were just going to be some underground sort of metal band. So I would say I discovered that I enjoyed teaching around 2002, and I declared English as a major because I was just it naturally came to me. I was really good at it. I wrote good papers. I enjoyed reading and analysis. And that's when I had a mentor professor who suggested graduate school. And she sort of said like, well, you get to go to school and think and write and do what you're doing now. And I was like, that sounds great. I'll do that. Cause I had nothing else to do with my life,
Right.
And so I went to graduate school.
But you were in the band at this time, right?
Yeah. Agalloch, this was like 2003. I went to graduate school.
Yeah, right.
Do my master's. So Agalloch was like popular, but we weren't touring. There was no demands.
Right. Okay.
And, none of us, we wouldn't have broken up. We had the internet. So I moved to Bellingham, which is in northern Washington. So still within a 5-hour drive from the guys at the time. And so it wasn't a big deal. I mean, we wrote Ashes while I was living in northern Washington, going to graduate school. And I came down at winter break and recorded Ashes Against the Grain. And then I loved it. I love teaching, being up in the class and being physical, talking with my hands, being I'm very passionate about it. And the same way I'm passionate about playing the guitar. And if I have a class that's really into it, there's a feedback.
Feed that energy.
Like an audience. If you have an audience into it, they're headbanging, slam, whatever they're doing, that helps you play better. And if I have students that are asking really great questions and they seem to be really into it, it helps me teach better. So it's very similar.
Well, it's that Socratic thing. I mean, you're getting the feedback and whatnot. And, my best college profs and high school teachers were the ones that were animated and into it. And I had an 11th grade social studies teacher. He was a massive prog nut. Yeah. And we would talk fucking tunes all the time. He'd be like, yeah, did you pick up the new Jethro Tull or what? He was just like a super cool guy. And and the guy was, good 30 years older than me, but he was like the coolest guy ever, as a teacher. Yeah, so I get that. Yeah.
That's the goal. The goal of teaching is to convey your passion for the topic. I mean, I teach at a community college, so I have none of my students are really majors. They're like, learning how to be a mechanic or something. And like, I need to turn them on to literature or cinema. How do I do that? That's a wonderful challenge. But there's a lot of unpredictability because I go into a classroom. I don't know what they're going to say. I don't know what kind of things they're going to comment on or ask about. And it's great to have to improvise. And the same thing with playing live. You break a string or something happens or you have really terrible onstage sound.
Right.
It's that wonderful challenge, like the other day, I'm teaching a course on horror films. And I saw. And we just watched Crimes of the Future, the new Cronenberg film.
Haven't seen it.
What's that?
I haven't seen it.
You should see it. And, the students had really critical comments about it that I didn't even anticipate. And it was as much of a rewarding experience for me as a teacher as it was hopefully for them as students. So that stuff's great. And the same thing with playing live. I mean, it's the same thing. So I did it because I love it. I love teaching as much as I love playing music. So for me, I had to keep both.
That's killer, man. I mean, it's kind of admirable because, like you said, though, you probably knew deep down inside the chances of world domination with Agalloch was probably not great. So it's like better have plan B or some other option.
It's your typical mom saying, don't put all your apples in one basket. But it wasn't like that for me. I loved it as much as playing live. So it wasn't even about any kind of insecurity or concern that, Agalloch's never going to make it. I just didn't want to fool myself. But, we wanted to be big enough that we could put out records and have a budget to put out records. We just wanted to put out records. Even now, that's all I really care about. I would say around 2010, Agalloch's popularity began to rise. And that's when the pressure and demand started to really pile. And I really had to find some ways to balance graduate school and teaching and going on tour. And it became a challenge. And I think part of the difficulty in the band was some people were making it all their life and other people weren't. And when that happens, you get a lot of resentment and tension. And I think that was one of the factors that kind of helped break up the band.
Well, let's go there in a few minutes. I think what I'm going to do is, I was going to do Sculptured next, but I think we'll drop that below. We'll get to the Agalloch stuff first, and then we can kind of move on to what is presently what you've got going on, and we'll go from there. Although one of the questions that I do have kind of ties in. Sculptured actually predates Agalloch, if I'm not incorrect, right?
By a little bit, and really only technically because John didn't have a name yet for what he was doing.
Okay. So there was a collective of you guys, like you and John, or was it just you and John? Or because I know Sculptured was basically you and pretty much in high school, right? With buddies, and this guy doing some vocals and that guy doing some piano, and
Here's how it all started. So I'm in small town Camas, and I was playing in a band. You sent me a picture of it called Necropolis.
Yeah,
and you're a power metal band, dual guitar solos and harmonies, but we had clean singing. But at that time, I was heavily into death metal, and I was in the underground, like old school underground, snail mail, putting flyers in your mail, doing a fanzine. And so I was like discovering this whole new world of underground death metal and eventually black metal. I was like, I said, I want to be a death metal band. Let me sing. I want to be a death metal band. We can't sing like this anymore. It's passé, And Necropolis lasted for 2 years. And so when Necropolis broke up, I was going to do a one-man kind of death metal band. And I tried a drum machine, didn't work. So I asked the old drummer, I said, can you just join me for this demo? I'm going to do 3 songs. And that was the first Sculptured demo. And that was early 1996. And my biggest inspirations at the time were like those early Septic Flesh records, Edge of Sandy, Amorphous, bands like that. Melodic, kind of avant-garde death metal. Mm-hmm. So I did that.
So like we're talking like Carillion or 10,000 Lakes?
Carillion and Tales.
Okay, Tales, right.
And Septic Flesh, it would be Mystic Places of Dawn, all the way up to the Fitting Wheel.
Okay.
And I wanted to get signed to Holy Records because that was the cool record label at the time that were doing like really melodic death metal. And I had a buddy who lived in the next town over who also was older than me and did a fanzine. And he's like, yeah, I just got this demo from this guy. He's a friend of mine. You guys have a lot in common. It was John Hamm. And his band at the time was called Uncomposing, which was also kind of like this avant-garde, kind of metal band. And he showed me it, and it was a picture of John, and he had like a kind of robe on. He was holding some roses. And I was kind of into like My Dying Bride, and like this weird kind of romantic kind of stuff. Yeah. Like, okay, cool. And then I was in a recording studio with this older friend of mine who had an industrial band called Landfill that I also played with for a while. And he's like, oh yeah, that guy's going to come by. And so John rolls into the studio, and he's wearing a leather jacket, an Entombed metal pendant, and I think like a Nocturnus t-shirt or something.
Uh-oh, look out.
And I'm like, this guy's my new best friend.
Right.
Because no one else was listening to that kind of music in my area. And he and I started talking. We were like immediately talking about Dark Tranquility, In Flames. This is like early Dark Tranquility and In Flames.
Sure. Right.
And all that kind of stuff. And he's the one that said, have you ever heard Over? And I hadn't heard Over. And so he came over to my house. He's like, "Here's over. I got."
What year's it? What year's this?
Would be maybe early '97, late '96.
Okay.
You know, and then I'm like, "Oh, here, listen to my new demo," and it was maybe the final mix of the first Sculpture demo, and I played it for him, and he was blown away. And he had his 4-track, and he played me what was the demo of the first demo of Agalloch from Witch of the Oak. And you know, so he was like already showing me something he was working on, and we felt kinship because we were both doing one-man bands because we were tired of being in bands.
Right.
And so it eventually ended up where, you know, he was like, "Hey, I'm gonna go record this demo now for this new band." He didn't quite have a name for it yet. That came a little bit later, and he said, "Will you play some guitar solos on it?"
Okay.
And, yeah, of course, it'd be fun. And yeah, eventually he called it Agalloch, and because this was also the time of Arcturus's Aspera Hymn Symphonia.
Okay.
And so hearing like kind of shreddy guitar solos and black metal was like, "Oh, that's an Arcturus thing," and he thought that was cool. Right. And he said, "Could you do that?" So I did. So on that demo, I just came into the studio and I just improvised some shreddy solos on it, and that was it. And I didn't think anything more of it. We were friends doing our own thing, and but then we had a mutual friend. I'm sorry. And then he sent my demo to Jason Walton, who was living in Minnesota, and he said, "You'll like this guy. He's into the kind of music you are." Jason was into the demo, called me up and said, "I want to join your band." Eventually,
from Minnesota.
And you know, and I asked my parents. It was so weird. I was living at home, and I said to my parents, I said, "Hey, I have this guy I just met like through the mail. Can he come live with us for a while?"
Yeah, can you just stack up in the basement?
And that's what happened. So Jason moved out. I never met him. I don't know how my parents, they were okay with it. I mean, I wasn't a bad kid, you know.
Yeah.
I was in my room all the time playing guitar or whatever. So Jason lived with me for 6 months in small town Camas, tried to find a job, eventually got out on his own. And he again knew John. And so we were all like, well, why don't we all play together? And so eventually, we did Of Stone, Wind, and Pillar, and eventually Promo 98. And Agalloch kind of slowly became more of a band. But John was still very much the primary fundamental songwriter.
Okay.
But it was kind of like Sculptured was my car, and I would drive that car. And then Agalloch was John, he'd drive that car. And for a brief moment, we were kind of in the same car, just trading off drivers, because there's Apollo Ends and Pale Folklore is the same band.
Okay, the same members.
Same members.
Yeah.
So it became a kind of collective.
Okay, so here's the question I had then. So you're kind of running these two parallel universes, sort of. What pivotal things happened, or what pivotal moment occurred that made Agalloch the primary focus versus Sculptured? I mean, because it could have gone either way, but what was it? John's drive to push Agalloch further, or how lay that out for me a little bit?
I think for fear of sounding shallow, it was, I think, because Agalloch was getting more popular after Pale Folklore came out. And I think it was the day when Andreas from The End Records, when The End Records was a really small label, said,
right,
can you guys play live? And we had never thought of playing live. And there was a time in the sort of the underground metal scene where like you didn't really have to play live. You could do
you didn't, right.
Solo. I mean, Dark Throne's a good example, but like you could get by just making a record.
Sure.
And so Agalloch never considered playing live. But he was like, a lot of people want to book you. And we're like, what
are you talking about?
So now Agalloch becomes a working band.
Okay.
2002. And Sculptured's not a working band. Sculpture was always a studio band. And
thing.
I shift my attention. Okay, how are we going to make these songs that have a bazillion guitars on them into a 4-piece?
How are we going to perform that live? Right. Yeah. Distill it all down.
So that meant rehearsals, rearranging certain parts, and then eventually putting together a tour, getting in a van, driving around, playing shows, making merch. I mean, then it became a thing,
Right.
So I was enjoying it. I was like, okay, this is fun. I'm going to put my focus on Agalloch because I was in grad school at the time. And so Sculptured started to kind of recede until about 2008. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it was just Agalloch started to kind of take off and demand more.
So when it started, you never realistically, and probably John even to an extent, never really had any designs on it being anything more than just an a studio album creating type project.
Yeah. I mean, John didn't want to be popular.
Okay. He wanted to be cult. He wanted to be cult.
Keep it cult, obscure, esoteric. I sent our demo off to the end without him knowing.
Oh, wow. No shit.
I was like, they'll give us a deal. We'll get a record out because they already have Sculptured, and Andres was asking me for other recommendations. And I said,
okay,
other band you might like. But John did not want to be that initially.
Did you feel like the material was strong enough? I mean, obviously it was, but I mean, you must have felt that, man, this is really like, we got something really, really big here.
Yeah, with Promo 98 was the time when I felt like we had a sound with all the post-punk clean tone guitar going over the heavier parts. I thought we'd taken Fields of the Nephilim and the Chameleons and combined it with black metal, and no one else sounded like that. And so I was like, we should try to get an album. But yeah, he didn't really have any big. I mean, because no one starts a black metal band to like make a living.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, you can now, but
sure. There's Emperor, there's Enslaved,
there's you can do really well.
And you guys probably, I'm trying to think, in the U.S., there's not many black metal bands that rivaled the level, the ascension that you guys had. You know what I mean? In terms of, I'm trying to think of who in the U.S. black metal band wise became. There's Judas Iscariot and there's some of these projects, but they never really, they never leveled up, in other words.
Yeah, I mean, closer might be Wolves in the Throne Room.
Well, Wolves, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, but they still came after you guys. I mean,
they came a little bit after. I mean, they opened for us when we did an Ashes Against the Grain release party.
I mean, there's a couple like Uada. Uada's kind of got that.
Yeah, Uada. Ludacra, obviously.
Ludacra, that's true. Yeah, man.
Leviathan.
But yeah, who knew?
Well, that ties in real quick, and then Jimmy, I'm going to let you get in here in a sec. But to finish off that thought tangentially, so your expectations for all you guys were pretty low key.
Just wanted to make records, man. That's all we cared about was making records.
But as you incrementally started to ascend,
right?
How did you and the other guys in the band? What's the word I'm looking for here? How did you start to assimilate that changing landscape as far as what those expectations were as you got past the mantle, and then the next thing you're on to is Ashes, and then Marrow? And do you get my gist there? I kind of jumped out of sequence, but
because we're doing it backwards. Most bands play live and then get a record deal and record. We did the opposite. We did 2 records, and then we had to start learning how to be a live band. And like, there's not a whole lot of videos, fortunately, on YouTube of those very first shows, but we were super, super green. We had no idea what we were doing. But we had to go through that to get to a place where we started feeling like, probably not until about 2009 did we feel like, okay, we can be a live band. This is starting to come together. So we had to discover who we were as a live band, because we didn't want to do backing tracks or any of that stuff. But the reality was we were in love with making records and putting a lot of
layering
songs. Yeah. So there was a thrill to it, but it was also like, what kind of band are we? And we found out that we were kind of like, not punk, but we were kind of like raw and hard rock, heavy metal. Like, we got 2 guitars and we're going to make it work. And that's what influenced Ashes being a bit more concise, was that adaptation to a live situation. We're like, let's play more straightforward.
Okay.
And so that influenced the songwriting. But really, I think in those years from about 2003 to 2010, it felt like a nice, comfortable, gradual move up. And it was just fun. I mean, I remember we got our first offer for Europe. I'd never been to Europe. My first time in Europe was on tour.
Wow.
And so, everything feels amazing because it's your first time. I mean,
right.
I felt like I was walking on clouds when Metal Maniacs published a little shitty photo of me in their demo section. I thought that was the greatest thing in the world. So, and it's good to keep humble. It's good to keep feeling that.
Yeah.
At some point,
but it's hard to deny it. It's hard to deny it when it gets to a certain level that you know, we're all human beings, and the adulation and the pats on the back, no matter how, you know, who you are as a person, if you're demure or, you know, or self-effacing or whatever, it's still, it has to affect.
It feels good. It feels
Yeah.
good. And, you know, you get to about 2010, we became somewhat more financially independent to where we could start updating our gear, because we were still using like our first guitars and our first amps, you know, things that we really, really want to use. And so that was cool. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna go buy myself a Les Paul. Yeah. And that's when I bought the Les Paul in the photo here, because that's the guitar I wanted for Agalloch. And we buy some cool effect pedals. I got a Marshall, you know, John everybody got kind of hooked up.
Yeah, right.
Then we're like, we got to rent a rehearsal space. We had a permanent rehearsal space, you know, and then we got more tour offers. Shows were selling out, and I just kind of rode the wave, you know, because I knew this wasn't. I knew I'm really fucking lucky, because this doesn't happen to everybody, and I'm going to just enjoy it because it's not going to last forever, and I don't know when it will end. But I really tried to live each day thankful, and like, I can't believe I'm sitting in some pub in Switzerland about to play a sold out show. I mean, it's one of the, you know, you just have to pinch yourself. So I took it and enjoyed it.
Jimmy, what do you have? I know you had some specific Agalloch stuff that you wanted to talk to Don about. So
yeah, I'll just do my quick little pale folklore spiel I was telling you about, and it'll just take me. I kind of wanted to sort of like share sort of a little anecdote with you, personal kind of thing, Don, and in talking about pale folklore. You know, any huge fan of Agalloch knows that, you know, wilderness, nature is very integral theme of the music and philosophy behind the band, right? And like for myself, like kind of what I do with my channel, I do these hiking videos, and you know, I kind of try to like tie that in with the music, and that's kind of my way of sort of like kind of, you know, giving that back to anybody that might be looking for that sort of thing, because to me, pale folklore is pretty much like the musical equivalent of the wilderness. It's, you know, simply nature put the music to me and to what I hear. And, you know, my introduction was like, I actually heard the record probably, it was like 2001, I guess, you know, a couple years after it came out. And it was this article right here.
Yeah.
And I remember when I first saw this, and Marty wrote this review.
I was going to say, which is written by a buddy of ours, by the way.
Yeah.
Marty.
A long-time buddy of mine. I knew Marty way back.
Oh, you know Marty too, right?
1995, Worm Gear Zine. We were traders.
Yep.
We would trade
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Cool guy.
Way back when.
Good,
yeah.
Good dude. Good dude.
Yeah. Yeah, he always did great stuff in here. But when I saw that picture of Jason with the deer skull, you know, it sort of like immediately like just entranced me. At the time, I wasn't really like into black metal or anything, but I was living right outside New Orleans, Louisiana, where I grew up, and you know, I read the review and I bought the CD and, you know, started listening to it. I would go to like a neighborhood park with like my Discman, I guess it was, you know, still pre iPod, and in like listening to the record, I'd sort of like close my eyes and I could see, you know, I see a clearing like with snow-capped forest. I could see like an enormous buck elk with these massive antlers like staring back at me, and you know, I could sort of like feel the howling wind, and I like felt this, you know, I needed to be there, if that makes sense. And it was then that I experienced like this sort of like immense longing and like yearning for like natural places, unscathed from, you know, industrial landscapes, you know, the warping landscapes that we're used to today. And I craved this sort of escape from the concrete, you know, a break from the mediocrity of modern living. And of course, we had nothing like this where I was living at the time, unless you want to count the swamps. But you know, eventually I moved here to Colorado, and I was able to sort of fulfill that desire in my own life, you know, and finding my vehicle for escape through hiking and backpacking, as I spend, you know, 40 to 50 hours a week on a computer for my career. And these are things that I, you know, these days I require on a frequent basis to, you know, for my own physical and mental well-being and health. And, you know, I largely credit this record with, you know, helping me find that path in my life. The music itself has a distinct feeling like it was, you know, played in an old cabin in the woods or something. The guitar tones that you guys found on this thing was like, I almost feel like I've not heard its equivalent. You know, like for example, the acoustic break in As Embers Dress the Sky. You know, the sound of the guitar, it's just like there's this really sustained resonance effect to it, like to the stringing, and you know, in like a way, it kind of like sounds like a piano to me. And so I was wondering, like, you know, if you might be able to shed any light on, you know, was there any impact for you, like personally, or any of the other guys that, you know, Wilderness Nature itself might have had on, you know, the writing, recording of these songs? And, you know, I know you're a big academic big on Thoreau and Whitman and things like this. And, you know, for you, is it more of a personal feeling in your heart, or do you find, you know, yourself a place physically in the natural world versus, you know, being on the concrete, or does it factor into your life at all?
Yeah, I mean, so I would say I'm lucky I grew up on the Columbia Gorge. From a very, very, very young child, I grew up deep in the sticks of Skamania County. In fact, if you look at that image of us on what's the Vista House on the mantle, the big open one where we're looking out, and you see there's a big rock in the distance, and it's called Beacon Rock. And I grew up on Beacon Rock Trailer Park, in a trailer park. But it's one of those places where we lived. There was not a lot of light. You were deep in the woods. And I grew up around, you know, hunters. I grew up around stories of Bigfoot, you know, things like this. Salmon fishing, sturgeon fishing, smoking sturgeon, smoking salmon. And so it is a big part of who I am. I went to school in those areas. I've come from a rural background. I took it for granted because I'd never been anywhere else. And it wasn't until Agalloch went on tour in the US that I got to see the rest of the country. And I saw just how different things are. And that made me really appreciate it. Because even when I went to graduate school in Seattle and Bellingham, that's still all the Pacific Northwest. It looks very similar. And so I remember getting into black metal and seeing a lot of Europeans, particularly Norwegian, Swedish bands, emphasize nature and have a lot of nature imagery. And I was like, those guys haven't seen the Columbia Gorge. And I told them, I said, we got all we need here. Let's use our natural world as our focal point. Because everyone likes to think about the Norwegian fjords and the woods of Norway and Sweden, but like we got the best stuff here. And so no other bands had really taken on the Columbia Gorge area. And so we did. And we took up Mount Hood. That photo in that Metal Maniacs is taken up near Mount Hood in the snow. And I was like, you know, I think it was, you know, speaking of Judas Iscariot, I think I saw on some of his records he was quoting Friedrich Nietzsche. And why would I bother quoting a European philosopher? Let's quote Thoreau and Emerson and Whitman and folks like that. And let's really make ourselves American. And it wasn't like being patriotic or nationalistic or something. It was just like an identity we had. And I wanted to be kind of competitive with European. Everyone thought we were European. So we didn't play live. People thought we were from Scandinavia. People always said we sounded European. So I felt more compelled to really emphasize a kind of American spirit. So that's where that came from. But, you know, as a person now, I love cities. I've lived in cities. I've lived in Middle Manhattan for a few years, and I love cities. So I don't feel this sort of like primordial, I love going into the woods, but I don't feel a kind of, I don't feel like I'm home. I feel just as home in a small apartment on 2nd Avenue as I do deep in the sticks, really, because I love simple living, and I found living in big cities to be quite simple. I usually didn't have a car. I could walk wherever I wanted to, for pubs, for coffee, for books, things like that. It was very culturally rich. So I love both. I suppose if you asked me when I was a more cynical, nihilistic kid, I would have been like, yeah, you know, fuck modernity in the city. Let's get back to nature. But I don't have that attitude anymore. But they're both great. I mean, I live now where I grew up. I'm back to, you know, kind of rural Oregon.
Well, I found like a reciprocal kind of thing for myself, you know, like it was like I could go out there to come back, you know, and then back again, you know, like I can do what I need to do here to get back out there to get what I needed to come back here. Is kind of like where the balance that I found for myself in my life. But I've hiked in the Columbia Gorge. It's a beautiful place.
Oh,
and, yeah. And so just quick follow-up question to that, Jeff. And I was not going to ask this question, but because I thought it was kind of a stupid question, but a fun question, but you brought it up. So if Bigfoot were real, What do you think his favorite Agalloch record would be?
Whew.
I think maybe Marrow of the Spirit because of the more ferociousness of it.
I was going to say I probably would have chosen Pale Folklore just for the reasons that I gave before, but then I started to think maybe the Mantle could be it because maybe maybe the Wild Man was the pale companion, the grim companion, that helped the person along to see that there actually was no God or something. And
we have a nickname for Jimmy on my live streams and my deep dives. We call him 10 out of 10 Jimmy. And Pale Folklore is like a 20 out of 10 because he can't stop talking about it, obviously.
Well, I'm touched you love that album so much. I appreciate it. I mean, you understand I recorded that when I was like 18.
I'm not gonna lie.
So
for me,
the fact that it still means something to anybody thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, for me, it's Ashes. That's my favorite Agalloch album, but just by a nose over the Mantle because the Mantle was my. We often talk about this in our clique of nerdy weirdos. That often where you come in on a band is where you often return to. My favorite band, bar none. Sorry, it's Rush. It's always going to be Rush till the day I die. And I came in at Hemispheres.
Yeah.
And I love Farewell to Kings. I love everything from, Fly By Night through. Well, I love most Rush, and they did put some questionable stuff out. But there was an 8-album run there between Fly By Night and Power Windows where they just could do no wrong. And but I still almost always invariably go pick up Farewell to Kings. Mm-hmm. Hemispheres. And it's just where it is. So. But I love the Mantle. But man, there's something about the songs on Ashes that just kick my ass. I love them. They're so evocative and beautiful and whatnot. So, you kind of answered a lot of my Agalloch stuff because they were kind of building questions there. But so at the height of the popularity, which you're saying it started to kind of reach an apex around 2010 until you guys split up, right?
From 2010 till when we broke up, it was really on a very steady
tendency.
It started to pick up speed a little bit. Yeah.
Did that ascendancy change you and your bandmates in who you were in any sort of ways? And were you at all personally and artistically defined in any way by that popularity? In other words, did you feel pressured to do certain things? Okay, that's where I'm getting at. So go ahead.
Yeah, I enjoyed every gig we played. I can say I enjoyed every show, every tour. Some tours were rougher than others, particularly near the end when there was interpersonal sort of issues and tensions and stuff. And it really just became, for me personally, a sort of juggling act, and we toured mainly on school breaks.
Right.
When I did finish my PhD and was looking for a job, I just found myself doing part-time work. I was an adjunct, and I would teach part-time for fall and winter quarters. And then usually there wouldn't be many classes for part-timers during spring quarter and none during summer. So I would do 6 months being an academic and then 6 months being Agalloch. And it was a really cool period. 6 months I'm a teacher, 6 months I get to go be, a rock star. So that was a really cool period. I can make it juggle. But for me personally, I never wanted to leave teaching to do Agalloch. Right.
Okay.
I didn't have a family at the time. I had a wife, but I didn't have like kids or something. Jason had kids. They were getting a bit older. He didn't want to be on the road for 9 months. John, I think, really wanted to be a full-time artist. And so I think it was hard for him to not tour as much because he had the availability.
Do you think he felt it all? And I'm asking you to speak for him, so maybe that's not the right thing. But in your impression, do you think he felt like the rest of you guys were holding him back to a degree?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. He wouldn't have any problem feeling. We've talked about all this. As I'm.
Are you guys all in the same area, by the way? You're all still out. You're all out there, right? Okay.
Yeah, we see each other pretty regularly now. I mean, John just texted me a few minutes ago. I mean, we're back to being the best of friends. And so,
that's great.
Absolutely. I don't think there's anything controversial about that. I mean, we were holding it back. He wanted to do more, and we simply really couldn't. And I was probably a major factor with the school schedule. Like I said, Jason had a job that he was happy with and a family, but he didn't have a tight calendar like I did. So that definitely did bring some pressures on the band.
I guess I'm going to go there with this because we might as well. I read in an interview from several years ago, and it was probably very, very shortly after post-breakup, that perhaps
probably a very angry interview thing.
No, it's not that. But I'm sure you've discussed this, you and he and all of you. But you made the comment to the extent that let me read. I'm sorry, man. I'm getting old and I'm having trouble reading my writing. My typing. I read in an interview from several years ago that sort of implied that perhaps at the time of the impending breakup, John was possibly setting up parameters to allow for continuation of Agalloch with other players and himself, and that he had trademarked the band name, logo, and copywrote live performances, which you seem to imply meant that you and other ex-members of Agalloch couldn't perform that material live as Agalloch. Mm-hmm. As we know, he didn't get replacement players, but can you discuss how that affected you and where you guys are all at now as far as repaired relationships, business dealings? Can you perform the music live as Don Anderson, formerly of Agalloch, sort of like Jeff Tate, formerly of Queensryche? Or did you get my gist of the question there?
Yeah. Yes, I can. And I did, essentially. First, I did a few shows just solo playing the acoustic guitar.
You said yes, you can, or you can't?
Oh, I can. Oh, yeah.
Oh, you
absolutely.
can. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You got to understand the headspace we were in. It was the end of the 2015 tour we did. We did a full month in Europe. And it was a rocky tour for other reasons besides interpersonal. But we were driving home on the tour bus from Greece all the way back to Prague. And me and John were chatting a great deal about the future. And I think both of us felt some degree of pressure, like, what do you do for a sixth record? And we were talking about Rush a lot, because Rush was a band that I feel like has had phases.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I was like, Rush is King Crimson's a great example too. Like, they keep reinventing, and I'm like, we have to do something kind of like that. We have to reinvent ourselves. And I think he felt a lot of pressure from that, perhaps. And I remember him saying, like, this is the first time that I don't have any leftover riffs. I have zero, And I know, and I was like, well, why don't we take a lot of time? We had done America, we'd done Europe, we'd done our, usually a band puts an album out and they at least do the two continents. So why don't we just take some time? You go do your solo stuff, maybe get into soundtrack work. I'll go and do sculpture. Jason's got his solo stuff. We don't have to rush anything.
Right.
And, but then I think 6 months had passed. There was a lot of silence. We kind of needed a break from each other, all of us. We've been living in a tour bus for over a month, and it's like sleeping in a coffin. I mean, it's a tight quarter.
Well, it's a marriage, essentially, is what it is.
It is a marriage.
Yeah.
And so they're just like, we didn't really follow up on anything. And when that happens, a lot of suspicions begin to creep up, and you start to question things, and you start to maybe get a bit paranoid. And the first thing that sort of happened was the Facebook page was kind of completely taken over by him, and we didn't really have access to it. So that immediately triggered a kind of like, oh, what's going on?
What the hell's going on here? Yeah.
And I think maybe a lot of the suspicions we had about like trademarking and stuff, I think we maybe found some things online through our own sleuthing, but I looking back, I mean, it could have been probably just a lot of paranoia and panic, I think John, I think he may have thought to himself like, oh, those guys have other things. They won't mind if I kill the band or if I continue without him or something. I think he really didn't think it mattered to us. and
he
he was very wrong about that. I told him, it's been 20 years of my identity, you know.
Yeah.
And so when that broke up, it was one of the first times I'd ever cried, like actively cried, because it felt like a death, and I hadn't felt that bad since my father passed away, and it was a real emotional, painful time. Friendships were harmed, obviously. Me and John stopped being friends, and that was hard because he was one of my very bestest friends for a long time. And oddly, I think Karada became a kind of what's the word?
Outlet.
Well, an outlet, but you know, and I hate to use this word because I don't want to diminish it, but it became a what do you call when you break up with a long-term girlfriend?
A rebound. Karada was your rebound chick.
It was. I think Jason and I panicked. We were like, oh, shit, we don't have a band. What are we going to do? We were like, I don't know how to be not in a band. Like, start with the studio thing. Like, I don't know what it's like to not. We got to redo this. And so we panically sort of started another band in a way. And that's how Karada happened. And that scratched that itch. But I carried a lot of bitterness and anger for a couple of years, and it really ate away at me. And I'm sure it ate away at John. I know we were both keeping tabs on Pelorian and Karada, and
who's selling more, who's playing more. Yeah,
a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Wow. Snarky comments on social media. Just bad behavior came out of it. A lot of it that I do regret and wish I could take back.
But you know, the good thing is, man, and you know what it is, and that is that you guys have repaired your friendship, and there's a lot of band members that fucking hate each other. Good example, George Lynch and Don Dokken for years.
Yeah.
And now George is coming out because Don kind of needs him to come out and do those final 3 songs, and you know what I mean? But you guys kind of fixed it. And
we did.
I guess there is one member it's not fixed. We won't go into that. But generally speaking, everything's pretty well sorted out.
It's and I got to tell you right now, it's like nothing happened. I never think about it. The reconciliation was really powerful for me. We met at the pub we always go to. There's a pub here in Portland called the Horse Brass. It's kind of an old standing pub, British pub. And we met and we hashed things out for like 3 hours, you know, and we weren't drunk. I mean, we had low ABV beers, like session beers, you know. So it was very sober, and we had a real heart to heart. And when it was over, it was weird. It was almost like we were little kids again. He asked me, "Can we be friends again?"
Wow, that's cool.
And that's not something I haven't heard. I mean, you know, I don't mean this to sound infantilizing, but that's like almost a thing you may have said to, like, you know, when you were little kids. You know,
yeah, sure.
Playground, like, "Hey, can we be friends again?"
Yeah.
And it felt like that. And I said, "Yeah, of course." And he kind of went like this, and then we got up and we hugged.
And this was you and him, or Jason was also?
Jason took a while longer. Jason's not very tends to maybe
touchy feely.
He doesn't want. He eventually did, but I was being eaten up, and I felt like a lot of stuff going on in Karada was motivated by revenge, to show that we could do it without John. And it didn't feel healthy. It didn't feel good. And so when we reconciled, it felt great. I told the rest of the guys in Karada, I said, I don't want to hear anything negative about John anymore. No more jokes, nothing. We're reconciled.
We're just moving on.
I want to keep it that way.
Yeah.
And then, a year later, Jason and him started talking. Next thing I know, they're at my house, and we're in the backyard splitting a bottle of scotch and sharing records, just like the old days. Whenever one of us did something, we gave it to the other person. So I have everything John's done. I have everything Jason's done. They have everything that I've done. There's always gifts. So it's a wonderful thing. It was a wonderful lesson in
That's awesome, man.
Letting your ego go and, you know, reconnecting. And yeah, I'm serious. It's like nothing happened. And
that's killer, man. A couple more quickies on Agalloch here. Jimmy, let me throw this one out and I'll come to you, and then we'll try to hit sculpture, and then we'll see where you're at, Don, if you want to bold or if you want to continue on. You pointed out in Weaving Influences that the Mantle and even Agalloch as a whole was essentially an amalgam of influences you ripped off. Mm-hmm. You didn't say it in exactly those words, but you kind of did in a way. i.e. Godspeed, Catatonia, Sand, which, by the way, I got to check out. I have it queued up to listen to. And then you talked about electronic influences like Boards of Canada, and I shared with you that's absolutely one of my that one's going with me wherever I go. Those records are going with me.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, just there's something about those albums, with the exception of maybe Tomorrow's Harvest, which I do like a lot, but you know, the three main albums are just so evocative of nostalgia and childhood innocence, and just they're just so incredible. So it was cool to see that. But you know, besides classic Tangerine Dream and Jarre, they're probably my favorite electronic, you know, act. But you also mentioned Leonard Cohen and Nick Cave. So talk about how you take so many disparate genres and artists and somehow warp that and form that into Agalloch's sound, which was very unique. And I have to disagree with you about one thing. I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but you mentioned that a lot of people talked about you guys sounding very European. I actually think by the mantle, you were sounding very Americana. I hear a lot of Morricone.
Mm-hmm.
I hear a lot of, there's something about the music that makes me think of not spaghetti westerns specifically, but obviously Morricone, you know, I mean, that's the link there. But I always felt you guys sounded very distinctly, you took black metal and made it sound American.
Oh,
I don't know if that's
I can see that with the mantle. Yeah, because I think the mantle was. I mean, there wasn't, and I don't. It feels somewhat self-aggrandizing for me to say it, but there wasn't another record like that when we did it.
I agree.
And I was scared to have it come out. I was nervous tracking a lot of the parts. I think I talked about it in other interviews, but bluesy guitars, the piano work, you know, I was like, I don't know if this is going to be accepted. There's too much guitar. There's not enough vocals. There's no blast beats, really.
That hysterical comment you made about we were just having like major anxiety about bending that just a half a note, bending that one note, but it's what the song was going to serve the song. And I actually laughed out loud at that because it was just like, oh God, we don't want to, we're black metal. We'll lose our cred if it's got a little bit of a bluesiness to it. But go ahead, speak to how all those disparate things came into to create the sound. And there was another thing too. You mentioned some of your favorite. You mentioned a record, I think it's a current 93 record on like a 10, but you also mentioned two artists in there that kind of were mind blowing to me. Coil being one of them.
Yeah.
And shit, who was the other one? Damn it. Do you remember who it was? Let me see. Oh, Nurse with Wound. Huge Nurse with Wound fan here, man. Especially like Salt Marie Celeste, Soliloquy, and especially like Shipwreck Radio, and probably my favorite, Funeral Music for Perez Prado is one of the most beautiful pieces of music. Do you know that one?
I don't know that one. No.
God.
Nurse with Wound's discography is so intimidating, but yeah, I know the one that's. Let me write it down for.
You've got to check that out. It is absolutely one of the most beautiful pieces of music you'll ever hear. Talk to me a little bit about those influences and where that came from. And I know Fields of Nephilim is a big one, and you know, so can you kind of expand upon that?
Yeah. I mean, I think our first prerequisite for anything was that it had to be kind of dark. You know, we wanted dark music, so it didn't even matter what genre it was. But also, I know you guys call yourselves nerds, and Agalloch is really the biggest nerds. I mean, we would spend hours on a tour bus drinking and debating constantly discographies, bands. My favorite tour was with Fenn. We were on the tour with Fenn, also big beer lovers.
Good band.
And we would have so many fights, not fights, but fun fights over all kinds of things. And so part of being a nerd is just always constantly searching, looking for stuff. And
Research.
Very research driven, you know. And if someone mentioned this band that we like, we go check out that band. If some band was wearing that band's T-shirt, we go listen to that band.
Yeah.
in the back in the day, as you probably remember as well, is that bands' T-shirts were the original hyperlinks.
Huge, dude. That was the thing. If you saw that picture on the back of an album and it was a Nazem shirt or a whatever,
Well, even like, I mean, why did I ever buy a Misfits tape?
Because the artwork.
No, good Metallica had Misfits shirt.
Yeah,
like Metallica.
Yeah. Oh, right. Of course.
And so there was always that way. And thanks lists were really big.
Yep. Huge.
So we were always researching, and we were just I also grew up on classical music, and I never really felt, and I studied jazz and blues with my guitar teacher, so I never felt like I had to listen to metal only. And John's the same way. And so we were fortunate there were some really good record stores here in Portland that had a lot of different experimental music, including all the World Serpent stuff that you mentioned.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Yep.
And that was like a world opening up. And it was an expensive world because they're all imports, so they're all $20.
Exactly.
But that's when, and they just seemed intimidating, like the current 93 discography, the Nurse of Wounded, the Coil.
It's insane. It's insane.
So we would take turns. We would devour it. Someone would get that copy of Coil. I get this, this Soul Invictus record, and we would trade and listen to them all the time. And from there you get like Nick Cave, and then you hear about Leonard Cohen, and you hear about Tom Waits or something. Everything that's like adjacent to that.
Sure.
And tape trading was that's how I got into Godspeed. It was a tape trade, and it was Slow Ride for New Zero Canada, and I blew my mind. And then when John and I saw Godspeed back in 2000, 2001, and we watched them play their instruments, and I said,
was that Lift Your Skinny, or was it? Yeah. I saw them first time too, dude. When I saw that for the first time, I'm just curious if you felt the same way. I know you talked about the tremolo picking and the EBow use and all that stuff, but when I saw them in a tiny little church, like tiny, and there might have been like 100 people jammed in this place. I went in there completely sober. Wasn't drinking at the time, wasn't smoking, wasn't doing anything. Didn't smoke any weed or anything. I literally felt high from the waves of sonic assault that they put together.
Yeah.
Did you have that experience at all? I mean,
well, it was cool because each one of them had a bottle of wine. They were drinking like fish.
Oh, were they really?
Yeah. And they were all chain smoking. It looked so cool.
Well, I know Ephraim was outside smoking a joint of the place. Yeah, he was pretty,
And the music was starting to kind of I could tell things were starting to get a little loosey-goosey.
Okay.
But it was the same thing. And I just remember looking at John saying, they're playing black metal with a lot of delay.
Yeah.
And like, let's do that. And then Odal was the song we wrote, or that John wrote.
My
and
favorite
it was
song.
Odal was essentially doing what Godspeed was doing. And sort of combining it with Swan's White Light from Mouth Infinity record. And so, it was references, like a lot of bands, especially because we weren't talking in terms of chords and key signatures and things like that. Oh, let's do that Swans part. Let's do that Godspeed part. Let's do that. Everything had a band name part.
Yeah.
The Over part, the Emperor part. It was like that.
Yep.
And so we identified parts of our music almost directly to a particular band that we were either.
Were you? How much? I mean, Pale Folklore was pretty much all John's compositions. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
With the exception of the solos. When did you start to contribute songwriting wise? Like, did that start on the mantle, or was it a little later? Okay.
It started on the mantle because the way we were writing it is we didn't have any kind of multi-tracking software. So what happened was John would do the foundations, like the main demos of like the main guitar parts and anything else you might put over it. And then we each got copies, and I would just try stuff over it, playing on the stereo. So just come up with stuff. And literally, I would just go into the studio and record what I came up with. So we got all this stuff on there, and then we would whittle away maybe what was too much.
So you're doing 2-track tape at this point, right?
I don't remember what we did. But I mean, at home, I'm just playing over at home.
But it wasn't Pro Tools when you're in.
Oh,
yes,
no,
right. Yeah, it's tape, right?
Yeah, it's all that.
And so you're doing a lot of improv at this point.
There's a lot of improv stuff making up, and a lot of guitar solos and things are sometimes improv to some degree. But basically, I just came to writing my own parts. I think with Pale Folklore, I played the same parts that he played. Maybe add a few things here and there.
Okay. Okay, gotcha.
But with the Mantle, it was like I'll write my parts over his parts, and Jason writes his bass parts over their part, and then it becomes like this
stacked thing.
Yeah, and so the Mantle was really, but we were. I mean, me and John in particular. I think Jason, I don't know where he was, but me and John were hanging out a lot, just the two of us, going to films and hanging out, and going shopping and record shopping and stuff. And he and I were way into cinema. And so we were the whole time we're referencing the film Dead Man, The Seventh Seal, obviously, Alejandro Jodorowsky's Found to Liz, like all those films that we kind of sampled.
Right.
Those are the biggest influences. And I think Dead Man in particular was a big one.
That was a Johnny Depp movie?
Yeah, Jim Jarmusch is that kind
of
Western.
I've never seen that movie, crazily enough. I need to.
Yeah, I would say every album kind of has a movie. I would say the movie for the Mantle was Dead Man. The movie from Arrow of the Spirit would have been Werkmeister Harmonies by Bela Tarr.
I know that one.
Beautiful film.
Well, and of course the Wicker Man for the White EP, right?
Yep.
I mean,
Jimmy, why don't you lead into that? Because you have
I did it, because some of my favorite of your contributions that I know, for sure that was you, because I know, like, as you were talking about, the Mantle, like how you guys wrote together, and it was a very collaborative effort in a lot of the music, it sounds like to me, which is really cool. But on the White EP, your contributions on this, particularly I wanted to ask you about the Isle of Summer and the Summer All Reprise, because I feel like one sort of informs the other. And I remember, like, when I first listened to this and I heard that piano piece at the end, and I always thought, for whatever reason, and I had bought the CD, and I always thought, whatever reason, that y'all maybe had hired somebody to do that. I know you guys like flirted with piano, but when I found out it was you that actually did that piece, I was like, wow, that's really amazing. Because this is like this piano piece, it really sounds like a classically trained person. I mean, this isn't just something you pulled out of your ass. I mean, to me, it seems like this was highly, composed. Yes. Thank you, Jeff. So if you kind of tie those things in together to the first song of the record, and then take some of those themes into the piano piece, it's kind of, I was just curious, like, how did because you talked a little bit about your upbringing in music, and it's like, again, it's like you don't just come up with that. I don't feel like,
Yeah. So if I remember, I wrote the Isle of Summer on the guitar, and then I'm not a trained pianist by any stretch of the imagination.
Really.
I incorporate what I know from music and the guitar to the piano. So I can go up to the piano. I know what.
I'll be right back, guys.
Good.
Like I know the notes. I know how chord progressions. So I can kind of improvise and make things up. And so I just took the chords from the guitar part and worked something kind of out. And some of it was, slightly improvised, because it was probably, I don't know, I think it's in the key of E minor, which is not a hard key. And, it's really easy to improvise in E minor. Because the only sharp you have is the F sharp, and so I was able to really kind of play with that. So some of it was kind of improvised, a little bit loose, but I'm glad that you think it sounds like classically trained.
Well, it sounds that way. I mean,
but I do play a lot of piano when I can. I have a piano in the house now, an acoustic one, and my daughter bangs on it a lot, and I think she's into that same, like, the resonance of sound, and that's what I love about it. So I've always tried to keep some kind of chops up, but I'm playing the piano like I would play the guitar. I mean, I don't have great two-hand, parallel, like doing complex things in both hands, like a Bach fugue or something I couldn't do. But I kind of know enough about music and the keyboard that I can do something.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing how the Wicker Man samples just like fit perfectly into those two songs. Like, did you guys decide that afterwards, or was it just like, oh, this is going to work?
I don't know. I mean, that's all John. I mean, I do want to make sure I emphasize that. I mean, John is the fundamental songwriter for Agalloch. I mean, he starts it off, and then we pile, stuff on it. But he is, I mean, I hate to use this word after the breakup, but he is the visionary. I mean, he has the vision. John has the lyrics ideas, the themes. He has the artwork. He has the color scheme of the layout. He really does have all that in his head.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so my job is to come in and just do what I can do on top of that. And so, like with the White EP, I gave my parts, and then he went off and did his own thing to it. Even songs that I maybe have more of a foundational role in, I remember when we did To Drown, on Marrow of the Spirit, which was mostly my song. But when I was done, I'm like, here, you do whatever you want with this. I'm going to go leave the studio and get a bite. You do what you want to do with it. And it was great. So, I try not to feel too possessive about anything. But a lot of things, it's John's thing. I mean, John's pagan and heathen and into that kind of stuff. I couldn't tell you anything about paganism. It's just not an interest of mine.
Yeah.
I'm not turned off by that imagery, but that's definitely more of a John thing. You go to John's house, it's exactly what you think it looks like.
Yeah.
My house doesn't look like that. I mean, it looks like this. I don't have skulls and runes.
Yeah. But you like the movie though, right? Because I mean, that's
I love the film.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Hey, Don.
As Christopher Lee's like, I did this film for free because some things you do for love, and what a wonderful thing.
Hey, Don, you don't tell anybody this, but you kind of look like you're like a professor or something like that. So I had one more quick. Did you get your Agalloch? Did you have another Agalloch, Jimmy, or are you?
No, I think I mean I could go for days, but those were the two big ones that I wanted to ask Don.
I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask you one more on that quick. We'll hit Sculptured and we'll see where you're at then. Okay, how are you doing right now? You
good?
Okay. So, what are your defining thoughts and impressions on the importance of Agalloch's place? I know you've referenced it a couple of times, like, I don't want to be narcissistic here, but be narcissistic for a minute, okay? Just put yourself in that place for a second and talk about what your defining thoughts and impressions are on the importance of Agalloch's place and the effect that they had kind of on the genre of black metal, especially Americana black metal, because you guys, again, we really talked about Wolves. Wolves wasn't around. They came after you, right?
Yeah, and I think they came from the punk scene, hardcore and punk scene. A lot of these bands in America did. Fauna is another band, and it was really revealed to me when I met the guys from Fauna when they came down here to play, and we were talking about metal, and we were talking, and I brought up Iron Maiden. I'm like, well, you're a metalhead. You must like Iron Maiden. It's a prerequisite.
Right.
No, I'm not familiar with Iron Maiden. And I could feel a gulf opened up between us.
What?
Because they came from a hardcore punk scene. And despite
How old are these guys, though?
No, I mean, they're young, a little bit younger than me. But you got to understand that they came from the hardcore punk scene. That's a very kind of – what's ironic is that it's a very left-wing, very leftist punk rock, anarchist leftist punk rock.
Yeah.
But the band that turned them into black metal was Burzum, ironically.
Oh, Jesus.
Because of the lo-fi. I mean, Burzum. You listen to Darkthrone records that are kind of more hardcore. It makes sense. I mean,
sure.
Scan black and white covers. It does kind of look like crust punk.
Sure.
But that's what triggered them. They went from hardcore to black metal. They skipped. See, I'm old enough that I did the latter. You know what I'm saying?
Sure you did. Right.
Started with, heavy metal, got into thrash, got into death metal, then black metal, grindcore, things like that.
Yep.
So there is a real difference between a lot of those bands that started in the hardcore scenes. And they had communes and stuff. It was very politicized, pro-environment, vegan typically. I mean, that just wasn't us. We weren't really political. We didn't have any interest in that.
You guys were very non-political.
Yeah, I mean, and it just didn't. There wasn't really any place for it. And that's part of the reason why Karada went political, because we were like, let's try that hat on. And so, especially during the Trump era, I mean, Karada was like, we're going to be a very committed leftist, pro-women, pro.
LGBTQ and all that stuff.
Capitalist, all that sort of stuff. It wasn't something we would have ever done in Agalloch. I mean, I'll talk about it myself, but it wasn't something in music. So there's a real difference there. So I realize we've been influential, and I think what I like to think of Agalloch as is I like to think of us as the embodiment of a mixtape that you give to friends to get into things.
Perfect.
When people listen to Agalloch, they hear, well, what do you guys listen to? We say Soul Invictus. They go listen to Soul Invictus. Or they go and listen to Boards of Canada. Or they go and listen to anything we rattle off in interviews. I was very conscious of using interviews to get people into bands. Or movies. Again, it's very nerd culture. And so I like to think that Agalloch has all those influences that people do go and watch a Bergman film and they do go check out Godspeed or Nick Cave or something if they haven't already. That's the most rewarding thing, is to feel like you turn people on to new stuff. And that's really the legacy I'd like to think of.
Well, if I could interject just a sec, because this ties in very much with the last question I had. We have a common friend in Austin Lunn from Panopticon, who I did a deep dive with on King's X. And, he
loves King's X.
I don't know if I told you this. I may have. I don't remember if I did. But we did that deep dive. And the next day he texted me and said, "Hey, I need you to jump on Zoom." I'm like, he's like, "I got to show you something, but it has to be on Zoom." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever." And I jump on and we're talking a few minutes. He's down at his studio thing. And the next thing I know, I hear him say, "Ivar, are you there?"
Mm-hmm.
And boom, Ivar Bjornsson pops up. And I'm like, what? Like, it's him. It's you. And, he's good friends with him, obviously. But, you did a performance with him in Antwerp, I believe it was. Was that at the Roadburn?
They were there, but I didn't really get to meet them or anything.
No. I'm talking about with Austin.
Oh, with Austin.
Yeah, you did an acoustic performance.
I did a show with, I did a solo show with Austin.
So clearly there's a guy.
Yeah.
He's a little younger. I think he's in his mid to late 30s.
Yeah.
Who, goes deep into the black metal scene, goes deep into the history and just in metal in general. But no doubt you've had a profound effect on him. And he told me as much because I told him that I was doing this deep dive. And, so there's an example right there. I mean, what does it mean to you to be to have been in that band and been in an influential place like that with your art?
The simple answer is that it feels very good. It feels rewarding. I think one of the things I miss the most about playing live is meeting fans. And I would always, whenever I met a fan that I could have some time to talk to, I'd always try to change the subject to what's
music.
going on with you, music, or if they're in school, I give
nice.
academic advice on tour.
Oh, nice.
What majors to go into. And
always the teacher.
We drink together, if they had something interesting to drink, we would drink together. And I really wanted to connect with them on a sort of fan to fan, really, and it was nice sort of having that relationship in a way we could nerd out with the fans. It definitely, I feel myself becoming kind of like an elder, I guess you could say, we have credibility now. We have been around a long time, and that's a good feeling. It's also a scary feeling, because it's kind of, what do I do next? Will I ever be able to do something next? Will I ever be able to do anything that's not going to get compared to the Mantle or Ashes Against the Grain? So it's a catch-22, but
tough problem to have, though, right?
Yeah, exactly. I would prefer it.
Mm.
I'm glad to have the Mantle. I'm glad that it's revered. I'd rather have that be something that always comes up in reviews of any future work I do than to not have it at all. So it's incredibly humbling, and it creates a real challenge to just make sure I keep my ego in check and stay grounded. And it's another reason why I got off social media, was to not feel
not the influence,
to not learn how to want any kind of adulation.
Yes.
I didn't want to become that.
Yeah.
I want to keep things real as possible, because it is very easy to go to your head. Very easy. People telling you you're so great every night. It's a drug like any other. You don't want to get caught up in it.
Yeah.
Wow. I have to ask. You know what I have to ask? Is there any chance ever, maybe not as a functioning constant, but
right? Yeah. So we've talked about it many times. There's no concrete plans in the works, but it is something we've talked about a number of times. And the first couple of times we talked about it, we decided, let's just never say never, but maybe we're not all ready to do that yet. But I do think we would like to. It is likely that we would play shows. It would be probably with a different drummer. I think
the
relationship with Aesop and John in particular was maybe a little too irreparable, unfortunately. But I think me and Jason, I think what we have that Aesop didn't was, many years of friendship that could withstand the worst shit you saw online. We could withstand it, and that's really important. We all miss it. We all miss playing these tunes. So it's likely that if we did do anything, it would be shows here and there off and on. But again, I say that there's no concrete plans. We don't have anything in the works, but we're certainly not against it.
Well, this guy, where is it? It's that way. This guy here got to see you 3 times. This guy here never got to see you. The one time I had an opportunity, you guys were playing. You were playing I don't think it was MDF, but maybe it was. But I thought you were playing in Baltimore, so I guess it would have had to be an MDF. But my ex-wife now, but we had 2 fairly young kids, and it was a lot of tension if I was going to leave that day to go see you guys. November's Doom was there too. I remember that very poignantly because I love them, and I really and it was around Pale Haunt Departure for them somewhere. I think it was that album actually, in fact. And so I never got to see him, but I would love that opportunity. But you guys, your friendships and they're lifelong. The rest of this is tertiary, and
that's what I'm really happy about, man. I mean, and what you shared. I mean, just to know that you guys have a good relationship again. I mean, that makes me happy.
No, I'm serious. It's like if I go record shopping, I call John up. I say, "Hey, meet me at the record store," or we get a beer afterwards. We get together every now and then because we also. I mean, the fact of the matter is, I knew this when we broke up. The band is always going to be alive in some way because there's reissues and things like this. Absolutely. So we still have Agalloch band meetings. Because there's going to be reissues coming out. There's all kinds of stuff that I can't say what it is, but there's a lot of stuff still coming down the pipeline.
Cool.
Okay.
So we're all still involved. We have to be. I mean, I'm still doing an interview about Agalloch, which is great. It's fine. But I'm saying it like it never dies. So I'm so happy we can be friends on it. And it is kind of cool that like when we do hang out, we don't talk. I mean, Agalloch's not the main thing. It's not business. I think it kind of became business. The old cliche kind of became business. When we hang out now, we're just talking about either our own projects or music. I mean, we nerd out about stuff.
Well, speaking of your other projects, let's jump into Sculptured now because I think we've killed the Agalloch thing pretty hard here. I think it was just incredible the things that you shared. I really appreciate that.
No, it's my pleasure. I mean, they're both meaningful bands to me, so it's great.
So you put out the Liminal Phase, which came out on BMG on September 3rd, 2021. Mm-hmm. So little over a year ago at this point. And by the way, is the End still a label or are they a distributor for there? Yeah, because Andreas sold it, didn't he?
Yeah. So BMG absorbed the End.
Okay.
And it kind of stuck around as like a kind of imprint or something, and it eventually completely swallowed up. And Andreas isn't even in the music business anymore.
Oh, isn't he really?
No.
Well, he probably doesn't have to be. I imagine he got a decent little chunk.
So BMG, I mean, they've been great despite being this huge company. They're great with royalty transparency. We get our royalty checks from the Agalloch records.
Oh, nice.
I didn't want Sculpture to come out on BMG, but it was contractual. So I'm like, this tiny little weird metal band. Come on, you guys are putting out the new Maiden record. What are you doing with me? So I kind of had to do it to finish the contract. But the 2 guys I worked with were old End guys, so it was fine. It was a good experience.
It was like continuing the relationship.
Yeah, so I would rather be and I'm a free agent now, but I'd rather be on a smaller metal label, and so I'm hoping for that down the road.
So. The Liminal Phase was the first album in 13 years. Now I'm curious. Maynard James Keenan isn't in your band, right?
No, but Agalloch was demanding. I mean, and I don't. There's no resentment or bitterness, but Agalloch just became the band I put all my time into, along with graduate school and teaching. So that's really
you just had other stuff that was more pressing.
Yeah, I'm a person that's very compartmentalized. I'm very one-track minded, so I like to focus on things one at a time. And it was like Agalloch, school, Agalloch, school, Agalloch.
Right.
School.
Well, so the Liminal Phase, I had heard that term before, but I have to admit I had to Google it because I wasn't exactly sure what it was. Tell me, how does the title of the album resonate or relate to the album as a whole, as far as a not so much a conceptual piece, but are each song kind of a liminal phase of itself, transcending to that final outcome, like the next rite of passage moment, or what? Can you enlighten me on that? Or am I reading too much into it?
I mean, you can read whatever, I'm not really, you can read whatever you want into it, obviously. I think that's great to hear that kind of interpretation. I mean, I think for each record I'm not as conceptual as maybe John is, but I kind of have a concern. Every album is concerned with something. Embodiment was concerned with the body, flesh, organs, things like this. And the liminal phase was interested in states of in-betweenness, not being one thing or the other. And so I wrote about issues of, some of the lyrics are kind of based off refugees, asylum seekers, just not being able to be defined as one or the other, and I'm just really interested in that concept. And it's somewhat philosophically driven. My academic interests have infiltrated the music, so that like this album has a lot of influence by the philosopher Derrida. And the new record I'm working on now is really influenced by Paul Virilio.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so philosophy is a big influence. And embodiment was all Deleuze and Guattari. So it's a lot of it's just continental philosophical, because that never comes in Agalloch, really. So that's really all that is. Okay. Not very concrete. I like the lyrics to be very vague and abstract.
I'm going to admit something here. I knew about Sculptured way back when, but I never quite got there. You know how it is, man. There's, and now it's 9 million times worse than it was 20 years ago, where you read about albums, you had to go seek them out. You didn't have the YouTube, and you talk about this in a topic we're going to hit on real quick here. The information's coming at you constantly.
Right.
And I didn't really get a chance to I think I checked out the first album, not the demo, but the first album a couple years back. And I go in phases. I'm like you. I love jazz. I love electronic. I love pop, ABBA, shit like that. My CD collection is ridiculous. Yeah. But so yeah, where was I going with that? I totally lost my track of thought.
Were you going to the talk that Don did?
No, but crap. I completely blanked there. I'm sorry. Well, let's jump on. Hunter Ginn is now working with you, and we know him from Radical Research. He's got, what is he, an Aura? What's the name of the band? Aura.
Yeah, the Polaris.
Oh, that's it, Polaris. Yeah. How'd that come about? I know he's in Florida, so obviously he's doing his stuff, flying in tracks, I guess,
Yeah. Jason befriended him, I think, through podcasts.
Okay.
And I wanted a different drummer for this new record I'm working on. And I needed a more technical drummer, because the liminal phase was kind of returned to sort of a more simpler approach, because embodiment was so over the top,
right,
technical and stuff. I wanted to be more straightforward. Now the newer record's a little bit of both. It's a little more technical, but maybe a tad bit more like liminal, but also a tad bit more like embodiment. So I needed another technical drummer. And so Jason's like, oh, well, I met this guy, Hunter. You should check out Canvas Solaris. So I did. Turns out Hunter's a big Sculptured fan and had been following Sculptured since the beginning.
Oh, wow.
And so I asked him, I said, would you want to play drums? So he said, yes, of course. And so he immediately demoed the drums. They're already completely done.
I was going to say, I saw some pictures of him, and I figured it's got to be for Sculptured, just the way that I think you posted a picture, or somebody posted
a picture. And he's already done the percussion, so the drums are all done, and they're fantastic. It's some of the best. He's the best drummer I've worked with.
Any idea when? Are we waiting another 13 years at this point? It sounds like we're way ahead.
Not 13. Yeah, we're way ahead. I just had a burst of creativity after that record. But, we record everything in our homes. Nothing is booked in the studio. We don't record like a working band. So it's all.
What are you using? Are you using Logic, or what are you using?
Yeah, Pro Tools. Jason is kind of the hub. I go over there to do guitars a lot, and I do guitars here at home. And so it's kind of a process, but I also don't have a record label anymore. So I'm going to have to shop it around. So if you know anybody. So I will be shopping it around too once I get something that sounds really good. I'm going to try to find a label. And you're a Tangerine Dream fan, so I can tell you we have a Tangerine Dream cover coming
No way, for real?
Yeah.
Ooh. Well, we're going to talk about those albums, but I'll give you a sneak peek of one that I've been listening to a lot.
Yeah, I have that.
One of my favorite albums.
That's a great record. I mean, I'm a huge Tangerine Dream fan.
Ah, dude. Well, hang on one second.
Yeah, he's got the whole box set or whatever it was
Oh,
that he
yeah.
was showing the other day. Yeah, there you go.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Purple Twilight.
10 CDs has the original Keep soundtrack on it, like the one that's never been issued before. It's on here. It's got Hyperborea, the Soldier soundtrack, which I don't think has been out. That was previously unreleased too. So this one's a good one. I whiffed on the first box set, which has the In Search of Hades. It's an 18 CD box set with the Blu-rays and the Steven Wilson 5.1 mixes.
Oh, Jesus.
They're going for like $600 at this point.
Yeah, no, I just have the records.
Can't justify it.
Records here, and I like the solos, the Edgar solos.
Any idea time? Well, no, you got to get a label, I guess.
Yeah, I got a label. Although we'll probably put the Tangerine Dream out just independently as a teaser when the time's right.
Speaking of that, where can I find the Suspiria cover? Because I couldn't find it on YouTube.
It came out on it was on an End Records sampler. There really isn't any real pressing.
Oh man, I want to hear that. And it's not out on. I searched YouTube and couldn't find it.
Oh, well,
if you find it,
I should upload it then.
I think you should.
Yeah, it came out on an End Records sampler from years and years and years ago.
I don't have that. Well, if I do,
I did that because there was some guy was wanting to put out a Goblin tribute album, and so I asked him if I could do it. I mean, just some dude, really, and it fell through. I mean, he had no money, it turned out, so I'd already recorded it. I tried to get it on the Anchor Bay DVD. I emailed Anchor Bay back when they were
when they put the
set, and I said, hey,
you
guys like to use a lot of like background music. I happen to be in a band that did a cover, but they had a necrophagia.
Oh, geez. Are you a big horror fan then?
I'm a huge horror fan.
We got to do a different podcast. We got to do a different stream.
Yeah, like I said, I'm teaching a course on horror films right now.
Can you see my Blu-rays back there?
Yeah.
About 500 of them.
Mine are only shelves.
About 250 of those are really obscure horrors. Not all obscure, but some obscure horrors. But
so is that like horror history that you teach, or is it like do you go back into like the older films? Or
no, well, this class is a genres class, so I kind of have the horror film genres. So we started with Frankenstein, the James Whale film, Blood Feast, Blackula, Night of the Living Dead, of course, Chainsaw Massacre, Exorcist, Suspiria, and I was going to show Shivers, and then I decided to show the new Cronenberg, and then just A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night, and then we'll end with Get Out.
Oh, Get Out!
But my biggest love is European horror, Italian horror, the cannibals, zombies, giallos, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, you're all into the giallo stuff. Okay, I must admit I don't own a lot of that. What about the Changeling? You like the Changeling? The Changeling?
I haven't seen enough. I don't know. That's the one.
Scott? Best ghost story you'll ever see. The Changeling.
The Changeling. I'll watch it. Yeah,
it's incredible.
I love Hellraiser. That's for sure.
Okay, so we'll start to sort of power down a little bit here. Do you ever see Sculptured going out and playing live? Is that something you envision that you'd like to do with it? You don't want to do it?
Okay. No interest. No, it'd be too much work. I just want to make records. I grew up listening to records. I just can't, with Agalloch too, we just want to make records. But then the label's like, you guys are getting popular. You got to go play. And
yeah, I can't think Embodiment would be very easy to pull off live.
The musicians are everywhere. I mean, the singers in Norway. Yeah. Actually, Hunter's in Savannah, Georgia. It'd be a logistical nightmare.
Yeah.
I do remember my thought where I brain farted for a second there. I was talking about the fact that I hadn't dug down into Sculptured much. And so this week I've been, focusing on the 4 albums. And I got to say, man, there's a lot of adventurous guitar work on there that it really... I am a guitarist, and I'm a pretty decent guitar player. I'm not Yngwie or Lynch or those guys, but I'm pretty decent. And the guitar work in Agalloch is complex, but it's more complex from the way that things are interwoven as opposed to, the flashy style of playing. You do a lot more flashier playing. Not that you're overplaying or you're, shredding or anything like that, but you definitely do more. There's a lot more prog guitar in what you're doing in these albums. I have to say that I think my favorite to this point might have been the first album, because I really do like that vocalist. Now, is that you? The death vocals?
The death vocals are me, yeah.
That's you?
Yeah, I sing the death vocals on Ola Sculptured.
Holy shit, dude. I never would have thought that for a second that was you. They're great. I'm a very vocal driven guy, so I do struggle a little bit with some of the cleans because it's very hard to sing clean and be good at it. But man, I really liked Embodiment a lot, and the Apollos. You really ramped up the horns, and there's some very interesting use of the horns to play, as opposed to accenting things. They actually, some of the horns, like I'm thinking maybe the first or second song, they actually take over sections of verses or choruses, which is unusual. That's not something that you would expect to hear, right? Mm-hmm. So how are you writing? Are you writing all this, or are you collaborating with people to write those parts? Or
Sculptured is really my solo project. I write all the guitars I write.
I'm talking about the horns and the woodwinds.
The horns I wrote. Yeah, the horns I write.
Okay, wow. Holy shit.
The horns, the keyboards, and all the guitars. But like with Agalloch, Jason writes his own bass lines.
Right.
Andy Winter, when he was on playing keyboards, he wrote his own keyboard parts. The horn thing happened. It was really just on the first record. I was like, I'm sick and tired of guitar solos. I don't want to do another guitar solo. And the owner of the studio was a trumpet player. He was really, really good. And I remember back to the Dream Theater song, Another Day. And I remember we're like, oh, wow, there's like a soprano saxophone, I think, or something.
Yeah, it is. It's Jay, isn't it Jay Beckenstein or the guy from Spyro Gyra, I think?
Yeah, I think it is. And I remember like, wow, it's so cool to hear that on a metal record. And I was like, I said to the guy, I said, hey, could you do a trumpet solo? It was literally that flippant. It was like, what would a trumpet solo sound like? I want to do what Dream Theater does. I'm sick of playing guitar solos. And he did it. It was awesome. And so we did it again. I think there's like 2, maybe 3 songs on that record with trumpet. And it was for free. I mean, if you recorded this guy's studio, he would happily play on your record.
Oh, wow.
So then with the second record, I was like, how to really develop the horns and not make them seem like a gimmick. I was like, man, I should really write horn parts. And so I hired a trombone player from the college I was going to at the time. And I wrote out the horn parts in notation and gave it to him. And and that's how that happened. And then I was just like, I just lost contact. And I was like, I don't want to do any more horns. It's not a gimmick. It's just something interesting to play with. And so I stopped doing it after that.
And then you did on Embodiment, you used this 12-tone.
Yeah.
What is it called again? 12-tone?
Yeah, it's adapted from 12-tone music. But when I tried to write using 12 chromatic tones in the Matrix, it was just too much to juggle and still sound like a metal band.
Right.
And so I was like, well, what if I just do like 4 rows? Like, that's enough for a chord. And so it's little matrix Cs of 4 notes going across or down, and then filling in the parallel intervals and using that to write music. And also, like, I have my guitar right over here.
Oh, cool.
I used to do things like shapes where I would do what looks like a staircase.
Right.
I would say, okay, I'm going to do that and keep going all the way to the 8th fret. And then I would do I would do a V. And then
you're changing the chordal shapes to.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking of like a V like that. Now, all that really is tritones ultimately.
I was going to say it's a tritone, and if you're in standard tuning,
But that would be the prison, like I said earlier, that I would work with that, and then I would switch it around and do like staircases like this. And so I was thinking more in terms of shapes, as well as words and things like that. And that's how Embodiment came, because I was tired of writing really traditional metal riffs, and I wanted to break out of my patterns.
Let's talk a little bit real quick about the Weaving Influences thing, which, again, if anybody, by the way, we at one point had 20 people watching, which is fantastic for this hour of the day, I would think, on a Friday. That's pretty exceptional. I want to thank everybody that popped by. It's been a truly fascinating conversation with you, Don. Not going to let you go just yet if you give me a few more minutes here. But, yeah, man, I mean, it just shows you This has been one of my most watched live streams live because we are live.
Cool.
And Jimmy, thank you for handling the comments, guys. I couldn't really do it I'm old and I can't do multitasking these days anymore. But so when you gave that dissertation or speech or whatever you want to call it, presentation, I guess would be the best word for it. You made some really incredible points in it. And a couple of things I wanted to ask you about and have you maybe elaborate a little bit on. And by the way, guys, if you haven't seen that, I believe it's called Weaving Influences, Don Anderson, something of that nature. Yeah. It's a fucking amazing hour well spent, maybe a little more than an hour, somewhere in that range. And what's so cool about it is not only the subject matter, which is near and dear to all of us that are watching and the nerds that are talking here, but is that you are so passionate about it, dude. You're into it. And that's so relatable for guys like Jimmy, guys like me, and Marty Rithkinen, and people like that. This is our lifeblood. This is the shit that other than our normal not mundane, but our kids and our families and those things. This is the shit that makes us glad we're alive and glad we're all connected here. So the questions I had for you was that you talked about we do the research, and we touched on that a little bit back about the band shirts in the old days. I don't want to be that old guy, but I am that old guy. In the old days, you looked at the liner notes, you looked at the thank you list, you read the bands that they thanked, and then you're like, oh, Exciter, oh, Voivod, oh, Gorguts. These are bands I got to go check out and look into. And nowadays, I don't know that, basically the research is you type in Bandcamp and you look up one band, and the next thing you know, you're in a rabbit hole from hell for the next 4 hours, and your bank account's wiped out. That's kind of how it seems to go. But the Maiden, Metallica, Atheist, Gorguts, Over connections, very obvious. But I was really excited and surprised to learn that you were a big fan of many deep jazz artists like Mingus, Coleman, Miles, Coltrane, and then we talked about Coil, Nurse with Moon, and Current 93. What do these artists mean to you? What do they mean to you in your lexicon of life?
I would say, and I think I can speak for John and Jason too, is it's really nice to find something that you can kind of think is like, this is my thing. No one else, like either very few people are listening to it, but it's like my thing. I mean, like when I got into Metallica before the Black Album, like everyone else, I was bummed that they got so popular, and all the jocks in my school like Metallica all of a sudden.
Oh,
so
shit.
So when you find this stuff that's a little more obscure that you really have to do your search, you have to search for. It's more rewarding to find it, but it feels even more personal because it feels like, okay, I'm probably the only person with this record in a 100-mile radius, or
yeah.
Feels like your thing, even if it's totally not. But it feels like when we were discovering World Serpent music, no one in the metal scene was talking about those bands.
Yeah.
I know Garm is a big Coil fan, but there really wasn't much, and it felt like our thing. So we were a little, that's
a great word to put it.
But that's a wonderful feeling to find something that and I do it now if I go record shopping. I mean, I'll show you some records that I've been listening to. It's because I see something with a cool cover, and I look at the liner notes, I look at the instrument use, how long are the songs, and then it becomes like a thing that it's like my record.
That's so cool. That's such a cool way of putting it, man. Because it's like you're in this little small exclusive club.
Yeah, I don't mean to sound exclusive or possessive, but there's an intimacy with underground music that you don't get with mainstream music. Like
exactly. Taylor Swift has 9 billion fans out there.
It doesn't feel as
you're just another number.
Like all my students listen to Taylor Swift or Kanye West or whatever.
Yeah, let's not go there.
But I had one student walk in my class one time when I was teaching in New York still, and the guy had a Poison Idea shirt on, and I was like,
"Fuck yeah,
they're from Portland. That's my band."
Right.
And we were like, hit it off.
Here's a great connectivity moment. 2016, my son and I go into a local microbrew restaurant place, and we sit down, and I'm wearing an Obscura shirt. Not Obscura the band. I'm wearing Gorguts Obscura. Not too many people know that, right? Not I'm thinking that, right? I walk in, I sit down, this young kid, probably 22, 23, walks up, and he's like, holy fuck. Oh, sorry, man. Sorry, I shouldn't say those words. I'm like, dude, what's up? And he's like, you like Gorguts? I'm like, fuck yeah, man. And he goes, are you going to the show? I'm like, what are you talking about? This was literally a few weeks after Pleiades Dust came out. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, dude, they're playing the Metro Gallery. I don't know if you guys ever played there, but probably not. I think it would be a little small for you. Metro Gallery in Baltimore. And I'm like, when? And he's like, Tuesday. This is like a Saturday. I'm like, I look at my son. I'm like, we're going. And we went down and saw one of the most mind-blowing shows ever. Oh, my God, man.
I mean, I think wearing shirts is always a way of kind of giving off signs.
Exactly.
I like to wear band shirts because someone might be like, oh, wow, and then you already know everything about that person in a lot of ways. Like when John walked into the studio and I saw John in the flesh for the first time, and he had an Entomb pendant and a Nocturna shirt. It was a Voivod shirt.
You're like,
I was like, this guy's my best friend. I mean,
well, I was just going to say, it's that meme you see out there where the two guys walk in to get beer at the cooler, and the one guy's got a Maiden shirt on, the other guy's got like a fucking Priest shirt on. They look at each other, and then there's fucking, rainbows and unicorns, and they're throwing flowers.
Exactly like
it really is like that. It's weird, but it's true,
Well, that's the importance, I think, of being so dedicated to something and doing so much research, is because you feel like you put the work in to find a band. So when you find someone else who has done the same work to find a band, it immediately creates a bond because you kind of understand each other's commitment and discipline.
Well, I think that's one of the really important things about your talk that you did that, I would direct anybody that doesn't understand, because when you tell people you like heavy metal, they just kind of look at it like, it's just some
phase.
Yeah, like it's not like, because they don't really understand what it is. Like, well, at least where we talk about it, but I mean, like what you said on your talk was kind of, the whole idea of the intellectualism of being a metalhead, because it does require that research and that sort of, like knowledge of other places that you may not be as worldly about. And, because all those things kind of factor into being a fan, it's kind of like this global sort of cult. I don't want to say cult, but like just
it is kind of a cult though.
Yeah, well, like community. I mean, it's just like we all know. Like, whereas you try to, I would even say like if you wanted to make your parents understand, like let them watch Don's talk, and it'll kind of maybe make a little sense to them, and it might be like, okay, like I'm not asking you to get into the music, but at least maybe just kind of get an idea of this is where we're coming from, sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, look, I got colleagues who are nerds about Victorian literature or romantic poetry. I mean, it doesn't matter. It's that kind of intellect that you get into something deeply and you excavate and you really get into the minutiae of it.
So I had a little context here, and I'll make it quick. You mentioned that the heavy metal genre is an accelerated form of art, i.e. the genre produces events or albums in sort of seismic shifts within the genre. Do I get that more or less right?
Yeah, I think I was kind of making the point that for a genre so young, it's evolved very, very, very quickly.
So do you still feel that way? And specifically, here's my tangential thought exercise. Often in heavy metal, someone has an idea that's a bit different, and they color outside the lines, like an Atheist or a Gorguts, very much different to what was going on, and very much anathema, not the band, but anathema to what was happening at the time that, with old school death metal or whatever. But these days, to me, it seems like there's 900 bands that try to emulate a specific sound of, and again, we can go back to the Bandcamp. There's more choice than ever before because the medium of creating is so readily available. Is it diluting what's, in your opinion only here, is it diluting what's out there and what's available and what's good and what's not? And, like, I think this goes on to the point that The internet, Bandcamp, streaming, all forms of tech have advanced the dissemination of these ideas and have therefore spread the virus. And by virus, I mean I don't mean it, you know what I mean, by like how a virus spreads, of information influence at light speed. But yet a lot of these bands revert to chasing the commercially viable trending sound. So a good example would be Tune Mold or Spectral Voice. These are great bands, but there's 9 million bands now that sound like them, I feel. And every time I hear one, I'm like, all right, I'm just going to go listen to Tune Mold. Do you have any thoughts on that or any strong feelings about that?
A couple of thoughts I have. And many of the thoughts are probably limited because I don't listen to a lot of metal, like contemporary metal. Like there's a few, that I catch, but I'm so busy exploring other genres. And like what you just said, if I want to listen to a metal record, I'll probably listen to Storm of the Lightspace.
Right. You go back to what you know.
I mean, because I hate to sound like an old man, but like, is there a better record than that since 1995? I don't know. But that aside, one thing I understand the concern over there being too much sort of information overload and being saturated, and then that somehow affecting the quality. And I also feel like I feel like a kind of sense of paralysis. I don't know what to listen to. It's like when you go to watch a movie and you're going through your Netflix Prime and you never find a movie, you just spend your whole night. You just keep
scrolling, going on. Yeah, exactly.
That to me is a bigger danger, is the paralysis of choice.
Yes.
Because back in my day, you got some promos in the mail if you did a zine, and that's what you listened to for that week. Or if I had an allowance, I went and bought one cassette, and that was the record I listened to. And if I didn't like it, it didn't matter. I had to keep listening to it because it's all I had, which was good because I learned how to like it. So that stuff has lacked. I think one thing is we also have a bigger window. There's always been billions of bands. Like when I started Necropolis, if I go to Metal Archives and look up the word Necropolis, there's 36 other Necropolis.
That's true. That's a good point.
But when I was, when I had no internet, I was like, we're the only Necropolis. But the fact is, there's billions of bands already using that name, playing similar style music.
You just didn't know about them. Bigger. There wasn't this connectivity.
Yeah. But I have those anxieties, but I don't think they bother me on a day-to-day basis because I'm too busy listening to, at the moment, I'm always listening to prog. Prog's my number one favorite genre. But yeah, I've also been diving deeply into spiritual jazz.
Like later Coltrane?
Yeah, later Coltrane. Alice Coltrane.
Coleman, I would imagine. Coleman? Yeah. Sun Ra?
Yeah. That's a whole world for me. And so it's like research. It's like, where do I start with Sun Ra?
Oh, Jesus.
That's exciting to me.
Talk about a fucking catalog that goes on. He dwarfs Nurse with Wound. You talked about metal elitism a little bit in this thing. I had a thought or two on that, and I've got one more, and then we'll probably start to power down. I think we'll do the guitar stuff later because I've monopolized a lot of your time tonight. So maybe we can do a guitar nerd / movie nerd redo at some point in time. But so a large portion of metal fans generally strike me as and this is my thoughts, strike me as very musically inquisitive and are seekers, but you also have jokingly mentioned metal elitism, and we both know there is that specter out there. It is there. I fall prey to it myself from time to time. An example is that we both, so the rank and file commercial metal fan, like the rank and file commercial metal. See, I just did it. I just was a metal elitist right there. The rank and file metal commercial metal guy. If I was to say, hey, Joe Random metal fan, what's your opinion of the Gorguts album Obscura versus, say, the latest Slipknot? Most generic, see, I did it again, generic metal fans are likely to not have a clue what Obscura even is or its effect on metal at the time. And right away, to me, that would develop a bias for me.
Yeah.
If I talk to him and went, dude, you don't know what Obscura is? The fuck, That's based on a metal elitism from an internal perspective. So is this a good thing, or does it further divide metal fans into these territorial, entrenched factions? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a terrible thing. And the reason why
we all do it.
No, but here's the thing, and it's a lesson I learned from teaching. because I'm just as much of a nerd about literature or something as I am about metal, but I can't come at my students that way, or they'll never read it. And so we have to see these as like learning opportunities without being condescending.
Bridges.
But of course, elitism is a natural consequence of having exclusive access to something and feeling passionately about that.
Which goes back to your earlier point about being in that little club of, hey, I'm the only guy that owns this album.
But we also have, I would say, we have a moral duty and an ethical duty to
very well put,
bring people in and not be proprietary over it. You know, so like to compare with my goal as a teacher, if I teach literature, is I want students to get into these authors,
not push them away.
Not push them away, because if I give them a hard time for not having read whoever, you know, I can't be like that. You know, I have to welcome them in and make that stuff accessible. Like my number one favorite author is James Baldwin. Now I'm, you know, what you haven't read, you know, Go Tell on the Mountain, or you haven't read, you know, Fire Next Time. Well, I can't be like that, because my goal is to get you into it,
right?
To facilitate an entry into that stuff, because I want my students to have access to more esoteric, complex, whatever you want to call it, material, and I can't come at them as an elitist. And I used to also work at classical record stores when I was younger, and that's people come in scared to ask you questions because they think you're going to make fun of them. But
yeah,
classical music, so I want to share it with you. So if they come in like, I've never heard Bach. Where do I begin? I can't be like, oh, what are you? Some sort of Cro-Magnon? You know, what are you? Well, you have to be like, oh, let me be that.
Out of my store, Neanderthal, please.
Yeah, you know, so
vacate.
So I think if we love something, we have a moral duty to make it accessible and to be really inclusive of folks. I mean,
that's an awesome way to look at it, and a perfect answer. Last thing on that topic, and then we'll look at albums quick. Sure. Interesting and possibly, and these are contextual. I was writing these out, and I apologize for having to read, but I think it's important to have the context to ask the question. Interesting and possibly controversial question about your statement regarding Burzum and Varg. You said, I'm going to throw your words at you here, and I want to see how you respond. You said you love Burzum, but not Varg. In other words, the separation of art from the artist. But if you or I or Jimmy are financially supporting Burzum, Argo Slint, or Grand Belial's Key, by buying OGs, represses, is there a real distinction there? Or are we simply using some sort of an academic mental gymnastic way of justifying, simply using an academic justification argument to support our liking this artist despite him or them being a massive pile of shit as a human being? Yeah. Case in point, what am I going to say? Who am I going to reference? You just talked about it.
Did I mention
Storm of the Lightsbane and Mr.
John Update? Yeah.
Yeah. I have those albums. I love those albums. They're brilliant albums. John Notvite, to me, was not a good dude.
Correct. Right.
And every time I pull those albums out, I have a moral dilemma. And I'm not kidding. I have a moral dilemma with trying to balance my love for that album in the Somberland in particular, and reconciling the fact that John was kind of a fucking piece of shit as a human being.
Yeah.
So the question is, where do we go from here on that? Like, how do you agree with any of my arguments there? And what say thee, Don?
No, this is a very important question, and it's not limited to heavy metal. It's film directors. It's even in country music. It's in probably a lot of books on my shelves as well.
Yeah.
I think our society is going through a period where we're having a very difficult time understanding that people can both do really terrible things and really great things, and that those things can coexist. That's really hard to, and understandably, I think that's very hard to reconcile. And I don't think we as a society like to sit with discomfort.
You're right.
And I think there's a period now where there might be too much of an emphasis on pushing them aside, getting rid of something rather than problematizing it and working through it.
Are you talking about cancel culture I'm assuming.
You could call it.
Yeah.
I mean, I that's also a difficult term to really nail down, because I think.
Well, I mean, the cancel culture thing / wokeism.
Right.
Imagine you guys are, Don, you're how old? 43?
44.
You're 44. So, you're 13 years younger than me. Jimmy, same thing. I came from a culture where using certain language, certain terms was acceptable that are absolutely no longer acceptable.
Right.
The N-word was never acceptable, but my father, he's still uses it. He just has not matured from his 15, 16-year-old self where he learned it from his dad.
Right.
The F word. That was something that we as teenagers in high school would say, yo, you're a, and now I have a son who is trans.
Mm-hmm.
And difficult thing to cope with, but I love my kids, so I'm not turning my back on my kid ever. So my son is no longer my son, he's my daughter, and I don't use those words and haven't for many, many years, but the F word is no different than the N word to me now in my perception. But at one point in time, I had a different perception of it. Mm-hmm. I've evolved. Society's evolving, but man, are we just too far? Are we going too far?
No, I don't think we're too far. I mean, I think what we're trying to do is become better and becoming more empathic and caring and loving people and recognizing differences and using the language as respectful to those differences. But there is a sense that we expect that of our artists as well. And it's a big, I don't want to hear what Glenn Benton thinks of Trump, or I remember when I met some of these Southern Florida death metal guys.
Oh, geez,
their politics probably don't align with mine.
Probably not at all. Yes.
And I have to remind myself, look, I listen to these bands because of their music, not for their ideas. But these things do bother me. It bothered me when Scott Kelly of Neurosis admitted to abusing his family recently, because I'm a huge Neurosis fan.
I'm a massive Neurosis fan, and that
probably had to take some time away from it. But I don't think I could ever completely get rid of it.
And the guys, just as an aside, the guys came out right away.
Yeah, I mean, I think what they did was right to come out.
Got in front of that hard, and I think that's an irretrievably broken situation there, so as it probably should be.
Yeah, I mean, I think my goal as someone who really wants to value critical thinking and sitting with discomfort is that we have to sit with it. And the one way I do it, because there is a big, say like at my college, like people are really kind of like, and I run a reading group, sort of book club. And we pretty much have done nothing but authors of color, which is of course great. And I think there's a lot of pressure optically to do that. Mm-hmm. But then I mentioned about, I think I asked one of my colleagues, what book would you do? And the book they said, well, I don't know if we can do more white authors. People really want to hear more about people of color. And I think, well, here's what I think we ought to do is we ought to push back against and read against the grain. Sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Nice. But like perfect example. Charlotte Perkins Gilman, The Yellow Wallpaper. It's a short story I teach all the time and touted as like a wonderful, fundamental text of feminism. And also mental health, particularly mental health in women. And the students usually really love it. And then I bring in some letters she wrote where she's an anti-Semite and racist. And I say, what do we do with this? How can we work in that tension that she's a racist, but really progressive when it comes to gender and sexuality? We don't cancel her. Instead, we problematize her and we work within that tension. Same thing with Heidegger and Nazism. Heidegger is not going to be excused from the domains of Western philosophy, but instead we treat his Nazism as a core focus and work through it. And I'd say the same thing with Burzum too. Rather than never listening to Burzum again, we have to confront that and keep that at the forefront. That's much harder and more difficult to do than just say canceling or putting aside. It's harder to try to work with that discomfort and come up with questions to address it. Now, yeah, I would say definitely rip and burn off CDs or whatever to try not to support them financially, certainly.
Right.
And I guess my out is that the Burzum CDs I have, or I bought when I was a teenager, when I wasn't really thinking about these things.
You weren't aware. You weren't aware of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like aware of it, but I really wasn't. I was 16. I just didn't care. I mean, as you're older, you do care more.
But I think by aware, I meant you weren't as intellectually aware of what that.
No,
meant.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
No, I wasn't. And I've said this in interviews before, but John is more than his Facebook post from a few years ago. I think you remember.
I'm gonna fess up to something. I never saw it, and I don't know what was said. I've never.
I mean, it was it was a joke, and he was trying to be provocative. But I know John like a brother, and I know that he's more complex than that. And I think that we have to apply that to everybody. People are way more complex, and people do make mistakes, and people say things, and we have to call them in. I have students all the time. I got a guy right now who's just out of jail, and he said the F word in class. Do I jump on him and keep him from ever coming to class again because the professor jumped on him? No, I can't do that. I can talk to him privately, but we have to call people in, and that's what we're missing. That's, I think, the compassionate thing to do.
Great answer, man. I mean, that's a difficult question for all of us because, I'm not kidding when I say when I pull out Storm of the Lightsbane, which is one of the greatest records maybe ever made in metal, I always feel a little dirty.
Sure. I mean, and I think I understand. I totally understand that. I mean, unfortunately, all those NSBM bands, they're not very good, so I don't have to worry about it.
That's a good thing. Yeah, like Satanic War Master, never going to have to worry about it.
Never worry about it.
Like Argoslint, they got great riffs, but just there's so much other metal out there. I get it on the Bertram thing because of, I mean, even shit, there was even some questionable stuff early on with Emperor, very early on.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a hard time with Faust. I don't know if I could ever play a gig.
Yeah. Yeah.
With Emperor. I would have a hard time playing with Faust. Whereas if you asked me when I was 15, I wouldn't have thought two things of it, But you get older and you get a bigger perspective, But these are, again, both those early Burzum records were influential on me. Hibis Lysa Taras is huge,
Sure.
that droning atmospheric black metal sound. There's no one else sounds like that.
That's very understandable, and I get that. And like you said, you came into that when you were 15, 16 years old. You don't have the world view. You don't have the intellectual capability to, not saying that you're not smart at 15 or 16. It's just your world's very myopic at that point. And it's not like you're going to look, even if we had the internet, because I guess the internet's been around since like 99, 2000. I remember I'm a big Porcupine Tree fanatic. I'm friends with Steven. I work for the band, sort of kind of like their management way back when in the 99 to 06 period. And Steve was one of my touchstones for introducing me to all these crazy, Boris and Corrupted and, really fucking out there shit, Venetian snares and, just all kinds of crazy stuff that I spent ridiculous amounts of money. I have the Hafler Trio. You know the Hafler Trio? Yeah. Is it Mackenzie? Is that his name? I think it is.
I don't know the names, but yeah.
I have all of the Corm plastics and I've got like $1,000 or more. No, probably like $2,000 wrapped up in all their special packaging stuff. And I'm thinking, man, I pulled them out the other day. I'm like, these are probably worth tons of money. I go to Discogs and they're hardly worth anything. I'm like, there you go. Humble yourself a little bit. But some really cool stuff there. But, Steven was a touchstone for me. And I remember very vividly when he started working with Mike and Opeth. And he's the guy that got me into death metal. He's like, you need to check this band Opeth out, man. Because I was really into like Frontline Assembly and Skinny Puppy around that time. And I'm like, yeah, man, I cannot get into those vocals. He's like, wait. You just sent me a bunch of Frontline Assembly CDs. Bill Leib's voice is all, distorted and, all snarly and everything. How is it any different than Michael's Death Growl? I'm like, oh, yeah, you got a point there. Blackwater Park within, a few days was my favorite record of that decade, probably. So I have him to thank, but he kind of introduced me to Burzum, and then we both kind of had a moment later down the road where we're like, yeah, I got rid of my Burzum records. Did you? Yeah, I got rid of them. That kind of thing, just because, and I'm not judging anyone else. I'm just saying where I came from. Last thing, you mentioned that you hoped to possibly expand your speech into a published academic article. Did that ever happen, or was that just...
No, I had put on to other projects.
Dude, it's good, though. That is so good. And I mean, anybody that's a metalhead that watches that is got to be like, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah, oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just like, it's how we're all thinking. You just are very eloquent. You put it into an exciting package when you...
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Do it. But
yeah, for sure.
Tell you what, we'll do the guitar stuff later because I do have 6 or 7 quickies there, but it's already, we're 2.5 hours in, and I know
you
you
play the records, and then we can wrap that.
Yeah, let's do some records here, and can we show you a couple things too, quick?
Sure.
Wherever I put mine, but go ahead, Don. Why don't you start off?
Let me see if I have more
What
live.
do I do with them?
Well, this is a record that I've been deeply into. Speaking of spiritual jazz, this collaboration with Floating Points, I've never heard of.
Oh, Pharaoh, right?
And the London Symphony Orchestra and Pharoah Sanders. And this is a record I've been listening to nonstop. It's dreamy, floaty. It's fantastic.
What year is that now?
This just came out a little bit ago. I think maybe 2021.
Yeah, but what year is that recorded? Because
Yeah, it was recorded in probably 2020.
Oh, he's still alive?
No, he just passed away not too long ago.
I was going to say, okay, so he did it prior to him.
This might be his last recording.
Wow. That's one jazz artist I've not dug into yet, Don. I've got pretty much all the Coltrane. I've got all the Miles. I've got a lot of, other artists, but that one I'm not familiar with it.
Check out Karma. That's the record I love.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. You want to switch off and on? We'll run through these.
Oh, yeah, you can do that, sure.
All right, cool. Do you know this one?
Yeah.
You have to know this one, yeah.
Yeah. I got Popol Vuh over here.
Oh, my God, is this album so good. My favorite by Popol Vuh. Jimmy, you know this?
Yeah.
I don't know that one. I know Nosferatu, but
you do know one song off of it, I guarantee. You've seen Opeth, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. They used to. I don't think they do anymore, but they used to open all their shows with Through Pain to Heaven.
Oh, okay.
This is one of the most beautiful, that little drony sitar. Yeah. That's the song from this. Not only is this movie fucking incredible. Oh my God, one of my favorite movies.
Great movie. Yeah.
This soundtrack is just so good, man. So good.
Well, I pulled. I rated my father-in-law's vinyl because I got my grandfather's Marantz stereo set up after he passed last year, and set it all up upstairs. So I have all my metal stuff down here, and then I have kind of a little bit more traditional setup upstairs because my wife she's more kind of 70s and stuff like that. But anyway, so I went and rated his whole cabinet, and I don't really know a lot of this old stuff, so I'm going through the and it's interesting because it's always funny when songs but you never really tied them back to the artist, and I'm listening to this thing, I'm like, oh, okay, I know all this shit. I just didn't realize I was
reeling in the years. And
so, Denny Diaz, man, some of the greatest guitar players ever played on.
Larry Carlton's a huge influence.
Larry Carlton's incredible on Do It Again.
The solo of Kid Charlemagne off of Royal Scam is one of the greatest guitar solos ever done. Yeah, I'm a huge Dan fan.
Jimmy, Don doesn't know this yet, so don't tell him, okay? Be quiet. But he's going to be joining me for a deep dive on Steve.
I could do a deep dive on Dan. I could. I've seen them live. I love them.
Do you know who Tom Draper is?
No.
He played with Carcass for a short while after Ben Ash left. And he's now in Spirit Adrift.
Okay.
Super massive Dan fan, super cool guy, about your age. We've been talking about doing Steely Dan on my show. And when I saw you were a Dan fan, I'm like, I'm going to beg Don to come on and do that with me and Tom. So
I am a Dan fan. Yeah.
So go ahead, man. Show me another.
All right. This is a weird one.
Oh. Here, I'm going to blow you up a minute.
Anonym. Is it better with the light off?
I don't think I know that one.
No, I'm just bringing you up.
Yeah, so this is why people should still go to record stores, because the reason why I got this record is because the guy working just happened to be playing it.
And you heard it, yeah.
And I was shopping. And I listened to the whole thing, and I'm like, "Hey, what was that you were playing?" And he said, "Oh, this is some German band called, And he showed me the record. And I said, "Dude, how much? I'll buy it right now." That's such a great experience.
So krautrock,
Spontaneous. What's that?
Is it krautrock?
Yeah, well, it's kind of weird because it's from the '80s, and I was like, what kind of? It was like post-punk, a little proggy, a little '80s synth wave. It's a really strange combination of sounds.
Wow.
And I was just like so struck with it, and it was serendipity, spontaneous, and I bought it there. And that's the thing that only happens in record stores. It wasn't an algorithm or anything. And it was a record that I told John about. He came over and I played it for him. You got to hear this band on NIM. There's not even that many YouTube videos, but you should check them out. Who would you?
Can you liken it
I
to?
Can't even.
No, not even. Wow.
Yeah. So
holy shit,
that was a good fun.
Cool. That's super cool, man. I'll keep myself large screen. We talked about this one very briefly.
Yes.
Zeit from Tangerine Dream. I think it was 72.
Mm-hmm.
I believe this preceded Phaedra when they kind of went global and international, or global. And don't get me wrong, I love Phaedra, Stratosphere, Rubicon. That stretch of albums with Virgin is fucking that's the shit. That's the shit. But this album is very special, especially if you like dark ambient, because this to me was the very first dark ambient album. That's
a great record.
It's crushingly oppressive, but beautiful at the same time. And yet, when you're listening to this, you can feel your heart beating. You can hear yourself breathing. Everything becomes internal. It's a masterpiece of an album. This is the 2 CD version that has the reissue from Reactive from 11 on Esoteric that has the Klangwald performances in Cologne. And man, just go get it.
Yeah, I love that record. I love that.
Go get it. This one, Phaedra and Oxygen. That's all I need. That's all I would need. But it's not all I want. So, there's needs and wants, that kind of thing. So, Jimmy, what you got, man?
I pulled this is a band called Wilkinsman, and this is neofolk.
Nice.
And I think this guy played. I think he might have played in Winter Flyleaf for a minute. But it's it's kind of one I've been recently reaching for. I actually put some of the music on this on one of my recent hiking videos. But nothing crazy, but just really good acoustic, kind of dark neofolk, really cool. Good vocalist too. Normally when it comes to neofolk, it's hard to find, or at least in my experience, I've usually like more the instrumental stuff. But this guy's a very, very good singer too. So, but yeah, if you haven't heard it, check it out. Wilkinsman. And
what year is that? Is that recent?
Yeah, this is. He's actually got a newer one than this that I've actually got. I just haven't gotten around to listening to it yet. But so this probably came out about 4 years ago or something like that. But if you like neofolk, this is good. I mean, this guy has ties to metal bands, but no metal on here, just full on neofolk music. Very good stuff.
Killer, man. I forget. Was I next? Or were you next?
I think I might be.
Okay, go for it.
Let me see. Speaking of German, so this is a band or a duo called Furs and Froling.
Yeah, I know. I'm familiar with that. Not that album.
And so I found it at the same record store I've been talking about. But I looked on the back, and everything checked out. We got Mellotron, Moog, synthesizer, and the guitars are all nylon string.
Nice.
So
wow.
Synthesizer and nylon string. It's on Brain. That's another good thing.
Okay.
It has a 13-minute long song. That's another good thing.
That's always a good thing, yeah.
And so I bought it and came home and listened to it. And it was another record that I immediately sent to John. And so it's nylon string classical guitar with a lot of ambient synthesizer sounds. And he said, this is what he wanted to do on the Serpent and the Sphere with all the classical guitar interludes. He wanted to do something like this, but they did it better. So if you're an Agalloch fan that likes classical guitar like we do, this is go get this record.
Okay.
Or
and
check it out.
Turn that back around for a sec. Look on the back there.
Yeah.
I'd swear, man, on the guy on my left, which would probably be your right, that looks like Florian Frick, kinda, from Popol Vuh.
Kind of, yeah.
Cool, man. So you've definitely been in a krauty.
Oh yeah, I love krautrock. I mean, whenever we went on tour, that's all I did. We would go to record stores and buy, especially in Germany, we would buy all kinds of kraut. There was a record store in Cologne that I bought that Zeiton record on vinyl, and because you can find more of that stuff in Germany, obviously. And
Yeah, of course.
For easier prices.
You a fan of Out of Focus?
Of the band Focus?
Yeah, Out of Focus.
I don't think I'm familiar, no.
You don't know Out of Focus?
Mm-mm.
Don, write this one down. Out of Focus, Too Late. It's kind of like a bizarre mix of the Allman Brothers, not Southern sounding, more prog sounding, mixed with what would I say the horns sound like? Just check it out. I'm drawing a blank on what I would. Yeah, really not. I think the album's called Not Too Late, and they have another one called 4-Letter Tuesday, I believe. That's really good. Got a feeling you might like it because you like jazz. It's kind of a cool mix of jazz and dual guitar harmony type stuff from the very early 70s. That reminds me a little bit of Almonds, but not Southern, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
More in the Wishbone Ash.
Okay.
Yeah. Which I know you know Wishbone Ash if you're a prog guy. All right, so this one here, staying with the dark ambient. This came in a box set that unfortunately the box was ruined by water damage, but I luckily managed to save all these CDs, which are these really nice digipacks on, I believe this is Rune Gramophone. Let me look here once. Yeah, Rune Gramophone. Don, you familiar at all with Death Prod?
Death what?
Death Prod.
No, I'm not.
It's a guy named Helge Sten, I believe is his name. I would kind of put him in the Lustmord vibe, except for not as evil and as oppressive. There is, I'd kind of say he's a weird mixture of B. Lustmord and maybe a little bit of Gears Jensen from Biosphere. You know that? You know Biosphere at all?
No Biosphere. Okay,
you got to know Biosphere. You got to check them out, too. That's another one for you. But, yeah, this is called Morals and Dogma from the 5-CD box set. I don't remember when it came out. Fucking killer dark ambient. Amazing stuff. So those are my dark ambient things. We back to Don or Jimmy?
That's me. And I just had to pull this one, and it just came in recently, and it's a beautiful new pressing of Stone, Wind, and Pillar. And it was funny because for the longest time, this was so hard to get. I didn't have a copy of it until when I saw you guys play. And I think it was like the first or second time you came to Denver. Y'all had a new pressing of it on Damarung, but then Eisenwald just recently repressed. And it's just, both versions are nice, but this is like a color vinyl, so I had to get myself a second copy. And to me, this is kind of like, I talked.
Ooh, that's pretty.
Already waxed poetic about Pale Folklore, but to me, this is every bit a part of Pale Folklore because it definitely feels in that same realm. And I think that a lot of this stuff was probably around the same time. But timeless classic for me. Fantastic pressing, really nice.
Such a kiss ass. Just saying.
Well, I had to put it into context a little bit, so I was like, I got to show off my.
That's a beautiful looking pressing.
Yeah,
too,
really
man.
nice. They did a nice job on it. Really did.
Thank you.
Thank you, Don. What you got?
Let's see. Maybe this one here, and we'll probably have to wrap up after this one. I gotta go pick up my kid at daycare, but
okay.
This is a composer, Alan Havanas, and he's an Armenian-American composer. He's long since passed, but he did end up settling in Seattle. But he sounds like no one else. It's very mystical, Eastern influenced. This is his piano concerto and another concerto for violin and string orchestra. And he has a very original voice. I think I said before, my only prerequisite for anybody is that they have some kind of voice of their own, whether it's simple or complex music, they got to sound like no one else. And he sounds like no one else. and he's one of my favorite composers. Not super popular, but
What's the name again? I'm sorry, because it's Alan Havana.
Alan Havanas.
Havana. He's European, I'm assuming.
Armenian American.
Armenian. Yeah, you said that right.
But very mystical, very kind of ambient in some weird way, but one of my favorite composers.
Very, very cool. I'll just show my 3 others I selected. I got
Talk, of course.
this. I mean, I know John's a big time Talk fan.
Yeah, we all are.
One of my absolute favorite bands of all time. Yob's new reissue of Atma.
Yeah.
Fucking unbelievably cool. And I don't know, do you know much about Art of Noise?
I know of the Art of Noise, but I can't say I know much about the music.
Trevor Horn. Wow. This is the best one. Just absolutely incredible. So, Don, I can't thank you enough, man. Like, this has been so freaking cool. And I'm sorry if I kind of was the main guy, but it kind of was. Jimmy and I kind of discussed it going into it, that I kind of had the lion's share of the talking to do. But, man, just so enlightening. And
well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
So much great stuff, man. And I'm not kidding about the Steely Dan thing. I would love for you to join me and Tom. So if we can put something together with that, I'll hit you up and see whether you're interested. And you'll be like, oh shit, it's that guy again.
Yeah, Don. I wish you all the best, man, on your upcoming endeavors. With your teaching and the new sculptured record. I'm excited to hear it. And
thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks again, man. Thank you so much for just for spending some time with us. It's very meaningful.
Yeah, it was lots of fun. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, you gave us a lot of your time today, and I appreciate it. And sorry, I don't want to make you late for your kids. So do what you got to do, and we'll be in touch. I hope. And hope we got a lot of people in here today, and that was very cool. So
great.
Thanks everybody
who came in. It means a lot that people visited and stuff. I really
absolutely, man. It just shows you guys are still very, very important to a lot of people. A lot of young guys too. CJ, I saw him in there. He's only 20. Fucking loves Agalloch. He just so. All right, man. Well, we'll let you go, and I'll exit you out so that you can just head out. I'm gonna keep Jimmy on for a minute or two, and thank you so much. That's all I could say, and hopefully we can talk again at sometime soon. So
sounds good. My pleasure. Thank you again.
And tell John I want to talk to him, because I did send him some stuff, but he's probably like, nah, I'm not getting near that dude. So. All right, man. We'll see you. Take care. Bye.
Cheers, Don.
All right. Wow. Very, very, very cool. Very, very cool. Sorry if I kind of dominated the conversation, but I had,
no, that's exactly how I wanted it to go, man. Like I said, I mean, I think you're really good at that in terms of just like the engagement. I just wanted to get a couple questions in is all, and I got what I wanted to get in. So that was really great. And thanks again.
Great. You helped me kind of keep things moving. And, it was, it was cool. What a great guy,
Fantastic. Was one of the best, man. I mean, just, just the legacy is there, you know what I mean? And he's still going, he's still doing music, and all those guys, would I be happy if they got back together? Fuck yeah, I would be. But if they don't, then, the work has been there, and it will forever be there. So, I mean, dude, great guy. And just I think he gave me a lot of good stuff to go check out. That's for sure. It was cool. He pulled some
and you have a bunch of sculptured albums to buy now, probably.
I don't have any of those on physical. So I
don't either, and I need to rectify that. We need to fix that with Don. So Don, if you're watching, don't forget, post that Suspiria cover. I definitely want to hear that, man. That's like Goblins.
Oh yeah, we gotta find that. What? Hey man, I gotta bounce but you want to give me a call? Yeah. Are we still live right now? Or
yeah, we are. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hang on. Give me 1 sec. Hold on.
Cheers, guys. Thanks for coming on.
How do if I leave studio, does that mean we're done? Oh yeah, no. Okay.
I think
you sure want to leave the broadcast. Leave, yes. Hold on.
Oh. Well, it looks like he exited, but we're still live. So I don't know if he actually ended it or not, but cheers, guys. Thanks for coming on. We'll catch you next time.